You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
But we're going to get right into it, talking about artificial intelligence and legislation. I have two Democratic members of Congress with me, Representative Sara Jacobs of California and Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia. Thank you both so much for being here. First, let's start with your legislation specifically. You both just unveiled some new AI-focused legislation. So, Congresswoman Jacobs, tell me about it. Walk me through it.
Yeah, so I'm so proud to be working with Don Beyer, who, as you might know, is getting a master's degree in AI.
Which we are going to talk all about.
But we together introduced two really cool pieces of legislation. One is the AI Guardrails Act, which would repeal Trump's moratorium on state-level AI innovation and guidance. We think it's really important that states, in the absence of the federal government actually doing anything, are able to figure out the best way to create guardrails around AI. I'm really proud to be from California that has been doing a lot of that work. And then we also introduced the AI Transparency Act, which is bipartisan, with Representative Mike Lawler, which would just create some real transparency requirements around these models, these foundational models about what kind of data they're using, how they're training their models, what kind of limitations the developers see in their models, so that we can have more of that out there, and that's really the first step in figuring out what other kinds of rules we need.
So, Congressman Beyer, on the moratorium component, would it also prevent a future congressional federal moratorium as well?
No, not at all. In fact, I think we both agree. We're both big AI optimists, but also even everyone in the industry knows there has to be some predictable regulatory scheme. But so far in Congress, the only bill we've passed was the Take It Down Act, which did sexual material. And there's all these other things. Sarah and I were on the bipartisan two-year task force that had 80 recommendations, 79 of them which are still pending. So as long as Congress is not acting, we don't think we should hold back state governments, which are the laboratories of democracy. And when we pass, for example, our Foundation Model Transparency Act, it would be fine to then preempt state governments on that, because we've done something.
Why isn't Congress acting?
Well, at least to start, I mean, we probably have different, first of Steve Scalise, who's one of the leading Republicans 2 years ago, said no regulation at all. And early on in the Trump administration, there was a sense that anything that was a barrier to innovation was bad. And we need a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think part of the problem is, one, a lot of our colleagues don't understand these tools.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of fear around them, and it's really like either we want no AI, nothing, or we've got to let it have, no protections or guardrails. And I think we both agree that the answer is actually somewhere in the middle. And I would argue actually a lot of the way we think about this tension between like innovation and competition is actually wrong. Because in my view, the US competitive advantage is in creating systems that people trust and want to use. And so actually getting the rules of the road right, getting the guardrails right, is what will make us more competitive in the AI arms race, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, can you guys talk a little bit about how Congress should be thinking about AI? It is a multifaceted, complex, complicated, in some ways unknown area, and I've seen an evolution of how members have been talking about it over the past few years. It used to be something very small about like, put up a little disclaimer on a political AI video, all the way to regulating an entire agency or industry, or putting guardrails around the limitations of what they can do. So can you guys walk me through, each separately, your own view of how you think Congress should be thinking about this massive thing?
Well, let me just start really quickly.
Yeah.
Part of it is that I think we have to think about it incrementally. Yes, we need a big picture vision, but legislation is almost never, you're never going to get it right overall first. So, and since we're both optimists, we think the wonderful things AI is going to do for us, but our responsibility is protecting the public. So we have to think about it from a safety perspective. So let me just pick one instrument. What's it going to do to job displacement? I read a fascinating study this week that more than 80% of the jobs that are likely to be eliminated in the short run will be held by women. Really a bad thing for our country. And what do we do as policy leaders to get ready for a large short-term displacement of workers?
How are you thinking about it?
So I think we need to be thinking about AI from 3 different levels. So one, we need to be thinking about the foundational models. That's what our Transparency Act does. Those like big, large language models, other foundational models that are kind of powering a lot of this. And what kinds of protections and transparency do we need around that? The second piece we need to think about is how those models are being actually deployed into our everyday lives. So algorithmic decision making when it comes to job resumes, when it comes to housing and mortgage decisions, all of these things. And then the third piece of how we need to be thinking about what Congress needs to do is then how do we anticipate the effects that AI might have in our society, whether it's job loss, whether it's bias, whether it's these political advertisements or sexual deep fakes, and how do we create protections and guardrails around what might happen in society. So to me, that's the three different layers we need to be thinking about. And the way I think about what our role in Congress is more generally is like, it's not to pick winners and losers. What it is to say, all of these companies are making investment decisions about where they're investing, what kind of systems they're investing in the framework of the rules of the road that are set right now. And we need to be thinking about what do we want that framework to be in within which they're making those decisions. So for instance, it probably doesn't make sense for what we want to have labor be taxed higher than capital, for instance, because actually what we want is people to be investing in systems that are going to augment labor, not displace labor. So how do we think about shaping those rules of the road so that we are creating the framework within which companies are making their decisions towards a good, positive world with AI instead of the dystopian world that we could get with AI? Because at the end of the day, AI is just a tool. It's up to us to help imagine what a world with AI looks like that we want to live in and then help shape how we get there.
So Congressman, the president at the beginning of his administration was like, no holds bars, go as fast and quickly as you can, beat China at all costs. But they seem to be shifting their tune a little bit. They're considering some sort of oversight over AI models. What is your reaction, or what is your understanding of where the administration is and Republicans in Congress?
Well, to his credit, he did keep the Safety Institute out at the National Institutes for Standards and Technology, which was a good thing.
It was not defunded?
No, it did not defund
Okay.
it. He actually kept one of the few things from the Biden era. But we were very concerned about the leadership that thought it was just about the race with China, naively thinking that China's not regulating itself. It's a highly centrally controlled economy with they're very worried about what it will do in their own economy. I think for us, the introduction of the anthropic mythos, which is the thing that where it could overcome all the cybersecurity guards that every company had, that was very relevant. So I'm hoping they're moving to understand that there are dangers too. But both Sarah and I are concerned, big picture, if you go back to all of the foundation model thinkers, the Demis Hassabis's and Eric Schmidt's and the like, they were all concerned ultimately about safety. We've never built anything smarter than we are before. Let's be alert to the dangers there.
So what about from a political standpoint? We know that the AI industry is vowing to invest maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in this political campaign cycle. How are Democrats worried about it? Because Democrats might be on the receiving end of a lot of that money.
Look, I think we need...
In a negative way, I should say.
No, look, I think we need to fix the fact that hundreds of millions of dollars are being poured in campaigns by outside groups, whether they're AI groups, crypto, different countries, and that is something we absolutely need to regulate. But I also think we need to understand where the American people are. So I talk to a lot of young people, and apologies for this very San Diego metaphor, but we can only be who we are, and I represent San Diego. When you talk to young people, what they'll tell you is that they know there's a wave coming that's going to impact them. What they don't know is it a tsunami that's going to wipe them out, or is it a wave that they can surf? And I think it's important that we recognize that people are really, really worried about what AI will do to their lives. Young people are not sure what to study, parents are worried about their kids, and it is our job to try and help acknowledge that and help shape the world that we want. And I do worry about something like I like to call the Fukushima problem, right? Where something catastrophically bad happens and then all innovation gets shut down. That's not good for anybody. And so getting the guardrails right now, getting safety right now, is actually what is going to help make sure that we have this innovation that we want, because what we have right now is a population that's really deeply skeptical and really deeply worried about it, and that's only going to increase. And I think this whole idea of competition, as if it's like who can ring this bell first to get to some highest, best AI model, is the wrong way to think about it, because we need to be thinking about competition in terms of what system is going to be adopted. How are people going to pick which system they use? And to me, that is much less about who gets to this mythical bell ringing, and much more about who is building systems that people trust and want to use. And that's what I think the American advantage is, and I think we should be doubling down on that.
Before I spoke with you, I asked my colleague at Puck, Ian Kreitzberg, who covers AI, and he suggested that I ask, this is a question for him, what is the response you're getting from the industry as you are trying to regulate? There's obviously this tension with the industry. They are now acknowledging there might need to be some sort of guardrails, but they also want some sort of freedom to do what they want to do in their business. So what's the reaction you're getting from the industry?
It depends. When you talk to the people who work in the industry, they are very pro modest regulation. We've talked from the beginning about light touch. We don't want to license algorithms or dive deep in the math. We don't want to do what the EU AI has done. But I think everyone from the top to the bottom has said that we need a stable business environment. And that means thoughtful regulations. And I'm not afraid of the AI money, because I think we don't want to do anything that's not good for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's also, we need to recognize that the industry is not a monolith, that there are folks within the ecosystem who have all different kinds of political opinions and all different ideas on what we want, what they think the right regulatory framework is for this. I represent San Diego in California. I spent a lot of time talking to these folks, and as Dawn said, the actual workers, the ones who are dealing with the systems every day, they are, I would argue, even more sort of asking for even more than we are trying to do. And so I do think it's about figuring out, how you create the coalition. We're never going to be able to make everyone happy, and the industry is not a monolith, but can we create a framework that works enough, that keeps, that creates those rules of the road, that, within which people then still have freedom to make their own decisions on what they think works best from a company standpoint.
Great. To end, I want to end on a little bit of a lighter note. We're almost out of time. So, Congresswoman Jacobs, what is the best restaurant or food in your district?
Okay, this one is going to get me in trouble. Well, the best food.
I know it's a tough question for a politician.
This is the most political question you could ask me. Obviously, San Diego is known for our Mexican food. It's delicious. I will not go in. I will be a real politician here, and I will not pick one Mexican food restaurant in San Diego. They're all better than anything you can get here in Washington, D.C. That's for sure.
That is true, but also dodging. Congressman, so for you, who is your favorite member of Congress on the other side of the aisle?
My favorite member is probably Steve Womack from Arkansas. He's not a close friend, but I really admire the many stances he's taken. And when there's a difficult session to have, they put him up as the Speaker pro tem. He does a great job.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I need to have you back to talk about data centers and like so much more. So we'll talk again.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Leah.
And thank you. We'll be right back with Scott McFarlane.
Congressman Mulliner, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with it? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. You know, let me think about that.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Back now, I'm Scott McFarlane, Midas Touch Network here for 535. In a Congress that has charitably been unfocused and at times schizophrenic, the issues of prominence shift day to day and week to week. There has been little attention paid, if any attention paid, to the issue of gun violence control, despite the mass number of mass shootings from coast to coast. Cities that are big and small, urban and rural, blue and red. If Democrats win control of the U.S. House in November for January, topic of gun violence control may get a renewed prominence. And the lead voice for that is Vice Chair of the Gun Violence Caucus at the Capitol. Georgia, Congresswoman Lucy McBath, Democrat who represents the 6th District. That means the west side of Atlanta, Douglas County, Cobb County, Fayette, and am I missing Fulton County?
Yep, South Fulton.
They're never forgotten. They never come last. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You've had some efforts, some attempts in the last couple of years to raise the issue of gun violence control. How much attention have you managed to get in the last couple of years to this issue broadly in Congress?
Well, most certainly during the Biden administration, we were able to do things that had never been done before. We were able to pass the most comprehensive gun safety legislation that this country had seen in decades.
2022.
2022. And then also under the Biden administration, this presidency created the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. First time in history that had ever been done as well. So during that time period, we were able to move really, really important transformational gun safety legislation protecting our communities. We were able to get millions of dollars that were appropriated to communities all across the country that are doing really good work.
These are grant programs.
Grant programs,
for locals.
Exactly, for community violence intervention programming.
And that's what's been taken away
Yes.
in the last 15
Yes,
months.
absolutely. It's $150 million.
So you're going through the process on the Judiciary Committee in the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force, trying to figure out how to either get the money back or
Right.
raise the issue again.
Right.
What's been done or what's been blocked over the last year that you've been trying to champion?
Well, quite a bit actually. We've not had any public safety hearings. We've not had any emphasis on judiciary, on the crime subcommittee at all whatsoever pertaining to public safety. When I become chair of the crime subcommittee under judiciary, I intend to make sure that that is a priority. But things that I in particular will continue to focus on is reinstating the assault weapons ban, which has already sunset.
It's going to be hard to get any Republican votes that infringe on the Second Amendment.
Well, but we do have pieces of legislation such as Go Safe that honor the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens that are gun owners, that have guns for hunting or for sport or for self-defense. So we do have pieces of policy and legislation that actually honor constitutional rights, but also keeping the general public safe from unnecessary gun violence, safe from those individuals that are perpetrators of unlawful selling of guns. So we do have pieces of policy, red flag laws, the Federal Extremist Protection Order. And might I say something that was so interesting that I don't think a lot of people know is that Senator Lindsey Graham was the initial author of the red flag law, and who was then Attorney General of Florida, Pam Bondi. She helped to institute this very law in the state of Florida.
Now, I'm going to ask you about red flag laws and some of the other granular proposals you think Democrats would offer next year if you get chairmanships and if you get to control the legislative agenda. But first, I think it's worth underscoring your backstory here.
Yeah.
What led you to public service, what led you to Congress, was the passing of your son Jordan. 2012, same year as Sandy Hook.
Exactly.
Explain to folks Jordan's story and what you've done with that.
Well, of course, I was not fully aware of the expansive nature and the public health crisis that we're living in with gun violence until my son was murdered in 2012. And what the country has deemed was the national loud music killing. My son and his friends were just going from one mall to the next. They were going shopping on Black Friday. And within 3.5 minutes, they went into a convenience store, gas station, to get some chewing gum. In that 3.5 minutes, a man named Michael Dunn comes across them, calls them gangbangers, thugs. He racially profiles them, shoots 10 rounds into the car, and drives away. 3 of those rounds actually hit my son Jordan, killing him instantly. So I spent 2.5 years in trial in Florida trying to get convictions for my son's murder and the attempted murders on the other 3 boys that were in the car with him. That is what led me to begin advocating for gun safety, because I recognized it was not only important for me to advocate for my son and the boys that were with him, but these kinds of tragedies are happening all over the country. And that any individual here in this country, you are 25 times more likely to die by unnecessary gun violence than any other industrialized nation. And so why were our federal legislators, why were they not keeping us safe? Why were they not concentrating on policy and legislation to make sure that these tragedies don't continue to happen? I was calling on our clergy, calling on our municipal and state leaders as well, that this is a public health crisis. It has to be identified as that, and we have to make sure that no one in this country ever has to fear living under this duress of gun violence.
You used the term public health crisis, used it 3 times just now. Is that part of your entree to Republicans to get them to engage by characterizing it as such, or do those who champion the Second Amendment and resist gun control, do they find that to be a turnoff when you say it's a public health crisis?
What I try to get them to understand is that this is not about taking away your constitutional rights. This is not about abusing your constitutional rights, because this has become a public health crisis. There is not one zip code in this country, there's not one community across America that has not been affected by gun violence. And so this is our responsibility as the people that represent all of these constituencies to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to protect all of our constituents, no matter whether they're Democratic or Republican or Libertarian or Independent. This is our responsibility. And so what I ask them when I'm reaching across the aisle is, help me to help you keep your own communities safe. That is our due diligence. That is our responsibility and accountability to them.
Let's tick through some of the discharge petitions, those parliamentary techniques you use to try to force a floor vote in the House on issues involving gun violence control. You had proposals over the last couple of years for red flag laws,
right.
Expanding background checks, the types of things where there is a potential for a bipartisan coalition.
Right.
I think you had 0 Republican signers to the most recent discharge petitions. Maybe I'm missing 1 or 2 fleetingly.
We've had a couple
from
that
New
have
York.
helped to sign on, yeah.
What do you do in January? And who do you approach in the Republican conference to try to start a conversation here? Because this is a distinctively politically toxic issue, has been for a long time, and we're in a distinctively politically toxic moment here now. Who do you approach and how do you approach, and maybe what do you use as an entree?
I think it would be prudent for me to approach those members that have very high rates of suicide within their states, high rates of gun violence within their states. Of course, a lot of our rural states, you have a lot of hunters and a lot of gun enthusiasts, but I want to make sure that I'm identifying those individuals that do have these kinds of crises happening within their states and try to implore to them is that I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help protect your own community, your constituents as well. And so let's look at these policies of legislation that we want to make sure that there's a balance of rights, common sense legislation, but also a balance of constitutional rights for law-abiding citizens that have access to guns and use guns.
When you propose red flag laws, you mentioned the unique players who've championed them before. Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, you mentioned the former Attorney General Pam Bondi. Is there a concern if a state adopts a red flag law, one of those scenarios in which a judge can order firearms not be given to people deemed by the courts to be a danger,
exactly,
that some states have the laws but don't know how to implement them or don't know how to fund them or resource them, because states like Illinois have had red flag laws but they don't seem to move on them very often?
Right. You'd be surprised. There are 22 states and the District of Columbia have red flag laws, but most constituents, most citizens don't even know that they exist. So it's public information, it's giving people the information that they need to be able to represent themselves in cases like this, to protect themselves. So it's really important, if we're going to do this in those 22 states and the District of Columbia, then why not make this a federal law so that every American across the United States of America has access to these life-saving measures? And that's really important to be able to do that, because all Americans deserve to have information about what they can do or what they have access to, as well as, law enforcement is involved in, the red flag laws as well. You're giving law enforcement, along with those families, the ability to be able to go to the court and petition to the judge, whether or not this person is a threat to themselves or a threat to the greater community.
Lucy McBath of the 6th District of Georgia. We have 1-minute questions in honor of the 1-minute floor speeches that you, among others, give so ably each day. This one tends to trigger bad blood, but let me ask you anyhow. What is the best committee assignment? What's the one you always wanted, or what's the one you think that is tops?
The one I'm sitting on, Judiciary Committee. I absolutely love what I get to do in the Crime Subcommittee.
Is it devolving in terms of its tenor and tone, some of these hearings? People watch some of the Judiciary Committee hearings, especially when you have some of the more polarizing witnesses, and say, hey, this looks a little too middle schoolish to me. Is that fair?
I will say a lot of it, I believe, is messaging, and what I have said over and over again is, for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you can listen to what they say, but you really need to pay attention to what they're doing. That's really, really critically important.
It seems to me like we're living in this clip society now, especially here at the Hill, especially among the 535, where people are trying to get a clip that's either specifically on message or could be potentially viral. And you hear that performative aspect, and that is a bipartisan dynamic. Am I misreading that? Is that what you think some of your colleagues are doing?
There's a lot of clickbait going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I just need this, I just need this good tweet. I need people to follow me. It's instead of really doing the work, instead of really being serious about caring for the people that are depending on us here in Washington, it's become clickbait. And so there are those of us that you will never see us screaming and yelling in the news. You'll never see us doing that because we are very serious and intentional about the questions that we're asking, very serious and intentional about getting the information and getting on record our witnesses so that the American people can see that we really are trying to really take care of them and make sure that their interests are our interests and that we're protecting those interests.
The other question on the list that jumps out at me is what's the most difficult part of being in Congress? And I'll tell you, that's not easy. If somebody asked the most difficult part of your job, your work, your life, you'd have to think on it for a minute and maybe drop a list, like a grocery list of the things that are difficult about some jobs. There's a tirelessness that comes to serving in public office. I think constituents don't necessarily recognize that you are so frequently triple booked trying to do legislative work and constituent work simultaneously and advocacy. But what do you find to be the most difficult part of serving as an elected member?
The schedule's not that grueling to me because I was a flight attendant for 30 years. So I'm used to 16-hour days. I'm used to working all days, all times of the night and day.
On your feet.
I'm used to being flexible when things change because that happens here on the Hill all the time. I think the thing that distresses me the most is that a lot of people just don't really seem to understand and know what it is we do. They think we're here in Washington just passing laws, but on the local level, all of the resources and all of they have access to through us as the federal liaison. I just want to make sure that people know that we're there fighting on their behalves locally because I believe all politics is local. And so if I can get you to understand that I'm here in Washington fighting for you, but being with you within the district, interfacing with you within the district, being hands-on for you in the district, that is truly my job. And so I work very hard, my staff and I work very hard to make sure that our constituents understand and know that yes, we're here in Washington passing laws, but what happens to you day to day, that's what concerns us the most. And we spend as much time as we possibly can getting them to understand that we are their liaison and what they have access to through us for federal governments and programs.
If you could indulge me for a couple minutes, ma'am, I'm going to keep you a couple minutes longer because I wanted, since we have this audience with you, talk about the Voting Rights Act. Talk to Congressman Mark Vesey of Texas, talk to Congresswoman Sidney Kamlinger-Dove of California, both of whom use the term Jim Crow modern times to describe how some southern states are racing to the Capitol to redraw their lines quickly, like very quickly, in a matter of hours or days. This may come to Georgia eventually in the coming years.
Our governor has said that it's coming to Georgia, but after our midterms. So we are going to have a special session to redraw our lines as well, to consider redrawing our lines.
How do you think that's going to play out in your state? I know it's hard to predict because they haven't started the process, but I bet you've looked through some opportunities here.
You know what? I believe that something's going to happen. I am the poster child for gerrymandering in Georgia. I am now in my 3rd district.
Why is that? Because you keep
Because
moving?
I have been gerrymandered each and every time they have, actually the last district that I've represented, they demolished that district. This district that I now represent was specifically created because the court in Georgia said that there were enough Democrats within that surrounding area that warranted having a Democratic representative. So I have moved to 3 different districts within 8 years. I am the poster child for that, and I have no doubt that just as all the other southern states are doing, I have no doubt that we too will have a redistricting session. I wouldn't be surprised if they're targeting 1 to 2 districts in Georgia as well, and I may very well be one of those.
And those would be majority minority districts or those with black members representing them?
Or even those that have, majority Democratic voters.
Is there a way you try to message this to your constituents to galvanize them or, for lack of a better phrase, to alarm them because voter turnout can cure a lot of what you're fighting against?
Right. I have been doing so. I started sounding the alarm last year. I started really talking to my stakeholders, talking to my leaders, on the campaign side, letting them know, be prepared. We saw what happened with the Fulton County Board of Electors. You know, all of our voter data was taken. We know where it is, and of course we know why they're taking it. We've just kind of watched what's happened, the voter suppression laws that have been put in place in Georgia along the way, even for that past election.
How are your constituents reacting to that raid in the county?
They're very angry
of their ballots?
They're very angry, but they're also very anxious because they they want to know, why are you taking my voter data, and are you going to use this to intimidate me? If I'm talking on social media, if I'm posting on social media against this administration, are you going to target me? Am I going to go to the polling location and all of a sudden I understand that I'm not registered and I can't vote here when I've always voted here, and I understood that I was a registered voter? They're anxious, they're afraid, but they're also angry. They're angry that their voice, they believe, is being taken from them as to what's important to them, that their vote is being taken from them. So I think you're going to see, we've already seen in early voting in Atlanta, we've already seen the Democratic voters have gone out in large numbers because they're demanding that their voice be heard.
Yeah, out of thoroughness, the Department of Justice has called that search righteous and that these ballots are best in their hands for now. This is going to be litigated literally by the federal courts. The county chair in Fulton has filed a federal civil suit, and we'll see what the district court does, or eventually the appellate courts. Congresswoman McBath, we kept you longer than we promised.
It's okay.
It's always a good sign that we're having an interesting conversation. Back on 535 in just a moment.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
Welcome back to 535. Joining us now is Congressman James Walkinshaw from the great Fairfax County. Also new, you were a staffer for Jerry Conley for how many years?
11 years, 2009 to 2020.
Did you work for him when he was the county executive also?
I did, yeah. I started working for him in 2007. He was chairman of the Fairfax County Board.
Okay, so you've worked as a staffer at the county executive, county board level. You have been a chief of staff. What is it like to make that shift from being the guy behind the guy to being one of the 535 members?
Right. So in 2019, when I was elected to the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, sworn in 2020, I had to make that transition on a maybe lower profile scale than this. And there's, I think, two significant differences. One, I spent 11 years as a staffer standing in the back of the room as my boss was in the front of the room, giving the speech or answering the questions. And at the end of it, I could say, well, here's some things you could have said better or differently, right? It's a little easier to be the guy with the critique after the fact than to be up there having to speak for yourself. So that's a different challenge. The other piece is the psychological and emotional weight is a little bit heavier, right? So when you're giving recommendations or advice as a staffer, that's obviously serious, and I took that seriously, but now when it's me, with my name on the door, having to make the decisions that impact people's lives, you stay awake a little bit longer and feel a little bit more of that pressure to make sure you're making the right decisions.
Have you introduced, forgive me, I'm blanking on this, have you introduced a bill yourself so far, and what was the very first one?
Yes, I introduced a bill on the day that I was sworn in on September 10th, and It's a bill that would require the president, any president, to come to Congress for an up or down vote before they could significantly slash the agency or workforce of a federal agency, or the budget or workforce of a federal agency. Obviously, a lot of my constituents have been hurt by DOGE and that chainsaw, that kind of, in my view, reckless unilateral approach. And I think members of Congress should have to vote yes or no if we're going to dismantle the Department of Education or USAID.
Do you have a ballpark figure of how many federal workers and or federal contractors there are in your district?
Yeah, so I represent somewhere between 50 and 60,000 federal workers. And if you take the 300,000 plus federal job loss number nationally, it's roughly 10%, a little more than 10% of the total federal workforce, like 5,000 to 10,000 people in my district out of work because of DOGE and those policies. I also represent hundreds of thousands of folks who work for federal contractors, from the biggest names that you would have heard of to small one-person veteran-owned small businesses that serve the government.
Okay, what has surprised you so far about this job?
You know, I get that question. Not too much has surprised me because I did spend 11 years here, including during President Trump's first term. So I had some idea of what to expect. I will say, and I knew this intellectually, but when you experience the pace of events, it's a different kind of experience to live through it. And this is an administration, in my view, that's reckless, and every minute of every day is ping-ponging us from crisis to crisis to crisis. And that's been a different experience to live through and try to respond to.
Have you had a chance to make some sort of friendships so far with anyone from the other side of the aisle that surprised you?
I wouldn't say not surprised me, and I have started to do that. It's important to note I'm in month 7, and a big chunk of that was the first shutdown when my Republican colleagues were not here. So I missed that window of time to build those relationships. But there are a number of Republicans, some of whom serve on the Homeland Security Oversight Committee with me, that I've developed, a rapport with, especially others who, maybe are on the younger side and, like me, juggling the demands of this job with the demands of their families. So I've started to develop that. And, that kind of stuff does still take place, probably not as much as it did 10, 20, or 30 years ago, but it does.
All right. Thank you for joining us, James Walkinshaw. This was 535.
Thanks, Paul.
That is James Walkinshaw, first-term Democrat, Northern Virginia. I want to bring a little breaking news here. 535 is just going to post this story in a moment. The top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, that's Jamie Raskin of Montgomery County, Maryland, is about to introduce legislation that would call for a special master and a special compensation fund to be stood up to provide money to injured January 6 police officers. There were 140 plus injured officers from that day, not counting those who suffered trauma, not counting the families impacted by deaths by suicide of officers in the days after. The compensation fund would be set up for the families and for the injured officers. It's a component of the argument of National Police Week, which is underway here at the Capitol and in communities nationwide, where they're paying tribute to fallen and injured police officers. This will be a piece of legislation from the Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee in line with National Police Week. So again, a special master and a special compensation fund that would earmark money directly to injured police officers. You'll note in recent months there have been some taxpayer-funded settlements with the estate of Ashley Babbitt, the member of the mob who was shot and killed by an officer as the mob breached the House Speaker's lobby. There are other litigation tools being employed by January 6 defendants to seek taxpayer money through settlements. Those haven't closed yet. In this case, this would be a taxpayer-funded compensation fund for the injured police officers, some of whom are still facing bills, none of whom has received a taxpayer-funded payout so far. So that story will post in a moment at the 5:35, and it is exclusive to us as we begin the afternoon here at the Capitol. Mariana Sotomayor is joining us now. The Democrats on the Judiciary Committee have been fighting a messaging battle through this Congress. They have no subpoena power. They have no ability to leverage their committee seats to command witnesses to come forward. How do you view what that panel does if the coin flips and they have control?
You know, we are in that season where we're seeing bills introduced that may not, I don't want to say it's never say never, but it's very likely, given what we see up here on Capitol Hill, that this is not something that Republicans are suddenly going to consider, put on the floor, and it becomes law. Like, that's just not the path. So what you're seeing now is Democrats intentionally proposing legislation that they hope will be part of the conversation, or maybe one of those first couple of bills that a Democratic House majority ends up taking up. And this is a conversation that, have you talked to Democrats in their last majority? They thought, okay, January 6th is settled. Like, we had a whole committee to talk about this, investigate this, and yet here we are. And there's obviously so many ramifications to what happened that day that still affects so many people, and that's what you're seeing. And I'm sure a reason why Raskin, who is the ranking member of Judiciary, would be the chairman of Judiciary if the gavels are given to the Democrats next year. This is going to be a major priority. It's something that is not going to go away.
Unequivocally, it's a messaging bill. I think they would tell you that point blank. But one of the things they like to test drive when they do messaging bills is how fast can they amass co-sponsors? What is the path to building a coalition, at least inside your own party, if you were to take the majority? And the early run, as of the 12 p.m. hour here on the East Coast, is that they've got 47 co-sponsors like this on the bill. Perhaps a decent start, perhaps an indication of what kind of future and trajectory it would have if you tried it, for real, with a Democratic majority. I want to pivot to what else the House Democratic Caucus is talking about today. You were reporting on their caucus meeting in the Capitol Visitor Center this morning. Sounds like the focus is on the Voting Rights Act and whatever damage has been done.
Correct. Listen, this is the first time that Democrats were able to all come together. This is them meeting weekly when they're in session is not new. Always happens. But then you have some very interesting gatherings, and I would put this one this morning into that category. Fireworks is what was explained to me by multiple people in the room. The reason why is because Democrats are so upset by these rulings, both by the Virginia Supreme Court and, of course, the Supreme Court of the United States, and they do not want to see their chance at the majority just be slipping away from them. We're seeing that happening as Republican states across the South are redistricting.
Well, what do they want their caucus leaders to do about it? I mean, short of, bang the drum and try to mobilize voters, do they feel like they're empowered to try something?
So that's what the conversation was about today. Part of it, Jeffries has, I will give him credit a little bit here, is that they had a feeling that the Supreme Court could strike the Voting Rights Act. He started looking at how can we continue to redistrict past 2026. There's a number of states that they will do that in 28. Now that map is expanding a little bit larger for them. But what can be done now is the question ahead of 26. Essentially, what leaders and also the feedback from members to the leadership was everybody has to be involved. There are a number of Democratic members who, for example, have not paid their dues to the DCCC. That happens at every cycle. But there is much more. There's more alarms just going off.
You start with the money call where you're like, everybody who hasn't donated or given your contributions, you got to give your contributions. Look what's happening. We need that money for Pennsylvania, Iowa, Ohio.
Yes, and for members who may campaign in districts nearby, go to frontline districts, go to those red to blue districts. You actually all have to be participating in this. There's also some conversations of potential punishment. If members just sit back, relax, say, I'm not going to donate, or I'm campaigning just in my backyard, you might not get that committee spot.
Let me unpack that for a minute. I think it's worth pulling the curtain back for a second here. If you're a frontline Democrat, somebody who's in a district that has got some level of competitiveness to it, maybe it's something that's got a 5-point margin here or there, it's not your responsibility to go canvassing the world and helping your colleagues and throwing lots of money to them. It's for those who are, I suppose, at a certain threshold of safety or perceived safety, they're expected to get to work.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And the thing is that a lot of members get comfortable. Listen, this is not just a unique thing to the Democratic Party. There's Republicans who also face the same kind of criticism. But what they really want is to see all Democrats out there, but also, there's conversations about the Congressional Black Caucus, because regardless, even if House Democrats do everything possible to win a number of districts, including ones that went super favorably to Trump for the last election, we're seeing so much headwinds against Republicans, that the Congressional Black Caucus is not going to look the same. It is going to dwindle in numbers, especially when these southern districts end up changing.
Or at least shift geographically, because you can see a scenario, we hear the conversations from our sources, Mariana, that states like New York and California and Illinois may be told to get back at it again and try new lines that perhaps can plus up the number of Black Caucus members. But respectfully, the issue areas, the expertise, and the representation that the Black Caucus shifting north has an impact. Is there a sense from your sources in the Democratic caucus that they are too focused on 26 and that there's a push to get them more focused on 28? Or is there a sense we need to find something to do now, even though it looks like the cases are closed?
Yeah, there's much more of a sense of we have to do something now. I think because, honestly, if you were talking to Democrats when they were last here over a week ago, they were feeling so good. They got Virginia, right? Like, they were riding high on that. They were going to more or less equate the Republican redistricts across the country. Still going to be an even playing field. So what has changed is, what do we need to do now in 2026? And that's where, again, the Black Caucus comes in. I'm told that they are going to be mobilizing in Alabama this weekend. If there's one thing that the Black Caucus does well, it is protesting. Silent protests, active marches on the streets. So I've been told to expect that moving forward. How much does that end up moving people? We'll have to see, because, again, the tactics of the 1960s, should it be ignored? But everybody's online now, right? Like, it's not that so many people are saying, hey, let me go to the streets. We've seen a number of marches across the country. We got to mobilize people that are not already engaged within the base. That's what Democrats have to do to make sure that they can flip a number of districts, including there's Democrats and independents who live in very strong Trump districts. Those people turn out. That's what Democrats are really hoping for, so that they don't just win the majority, but can win in a very decisive way.
A few things from my notebook. Talked to Steve Cohen, the Memphis Democrat, who is being very much boxed out through the new maps in Tennessee, and asked him what his thoughts were on the federal legal challenges that have been mustered, including by the NAACP, to try to stop the redraws in Tennessee. Congressman Cohen says he is not going to make predictions about this. He has some hope in legal cases, but he says he's not putting all his hope in a legal case. It's a real unclear and cloudy future for Steve Cohen or Democratic representation in Memphis, and I think people are declaratively acknowledging that here. Court hearing on that matter is going to be May 21st. It is a local court case in Tennessee to challenge from the NAACP to that state. In Virginia, we have a whole bunch of candidates in districts that don't exist anymore or never existed in the first place. In the 7th district, the one that was going to be accused of being a lobster-shaped district that spans from the northern Virginia suburbs down towards Harrisonburg and James Madison University and Interstate 81. There were a whole bunch of candidates lining up because it was a vacant, unoccupied seat that was going to be overwhelmingly Democratic. So you had this arms race of people who wanted in on the race and were raising boatloads of money, millions of dollars. They tell me they're not sure what they're going to do. They're waiting for appeals. The appeals will not work in Virginia, so they're going to have to bow out and, I suppose, disperse or hold for the future that campaign money. What's your conversations with Virginia Democrats like? Mine is a mixture of denial of what's just happened, and the reality is you have to sink in for some, to we need to take this energy, bottle it, and try to win maybe 2 or 3 of these 4 seats we were hoping to gain.
Yes, so our colleague on 535, Leanne Caldwell, just interviewed Don Beyer. I was able to grab him right after because I had these questions as I talked to some of these Virginia Democrats, like, what does it look like? And realistically, everyone acknowledges they're not going to be able to go back to the maps that voters just voted for. There was a very contentious call over the weekend with Virginia lawmakers and also Jeffries, and I think something notable that came out of those conversations was this idea to put age limits on the state Supreme Court justices.
That feels like a third rail.
That was, people just angrily shouting suggestions, because there is that fervor among Democrats to just do everything possible. Well, as some Democrats pointed out to me, if we were to do that, what makes us any different than, let's say, Trump saying, hey, I'm going to endorse other candidates to run against those Indiana senators who voted against redistricting to try and get my kind of people to do what I want.
There. So I want to press you more on that. The caucus members you talk to, when you do your reporting on this, do they want to fight Trump-like in some cases? Do they want to have a symmetrical warfare? Because I'm getting a sense that the caucus is somewhat divided as to whether they want to restore norms and not be like the other guy. And there's others who say we need to be like the other guy or we're going to lose here. I bet that fracture is something you're seeing.
Yes, I'm hearing the same thing too. You have some who are just kind of looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, we can't do what Republicans have been doing. We can't do what Trump is doing. And then you have a whole other set that says, well, if we don't, they're going to beat us out of power for a very long time. So we got to push back. And that is absolutely a division that I think is going to continue on, especially because, listen, if Democrats win the House and also potentially the Senate, you still have Trump in the White House. So the base is going to be calling for impeachments and investigations, which it's congressional oversight duty. They have that responsibility to investigate. They're going to have to tread that with the reality that so many Americans, regardless of party, are clearly showing in the polling. What's top of mind is economy, affordability, and not only just straddling that line, but proving to voters ahead of 2028, hey, you can trust the Democratic Party again. That is the biggest thing that Democrats are going to have to contend with because, of course, Trump is going to be a foil if, again, Democrats control Congress, but it is going to be so much harder to prove to voters who, again, voted for Democrats for a long time, said, the Democratic Party hasn't produced for me, I'm going to try out the Republican Party. Now those voters are saying, oh my gosh, not what I was expecting. Let me vote for Democrats. But if Democrats, or frankly, if Congress, if government is not able to alleviate a lot of the feelings that people are experiencing on the economy, are voters just going to say, I give up, I'm going to sit down, I'm not going to vote? There's some people who are already there. That is the biggest, I think, more ideological, big picture struggle that I'm hearing from Democrats is how do we put proof to the pudding, especially after 2024? Voters saying, I don't trust the party. I might not like Trump, but I don't trust the Democratic Party on a number of issues.
I want to be transparent here. Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina was going to join us and talk about his new legislation on cryptocurrency and his efforts in 2022 to pass that sweeping Gun Control Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and what he would recommend Congress do next year if they want to try something like that again. It's a busy vote day in the Senate. Votes are underway, so we're going to pause on that and return with Senator Tillis in the days to come. We're expecting Congressman Jared Moskowitz of Florida to join us. He's just down the hall at his office, so we'll see how fast he can walk down here to talk about new legislation he's proposing, which would overhaul the U.S. Secret Service. Amid the concerns about not one, not two, but 3 attempted assassinations against President Trump, there are concerns the Secret Service may need different resources, different oversight, or a different set of agencies to which it reports. We'll talk to Congressman Moskowitz in the minutes ahead. He's the chair of the Congressional Sneaker Caucus, so if he can run down here, he'll save time. While I have you, though, I want to ask about another element of the House Democratic Caucus that jumps out at me, and it relates to Florida. They brought a field hearing on the road on Tuesday to Palm Beach to talk about the Epstein Files controversy, which continues to dog the administration, and they heard from survivors. And survivors have been trying to get an audience with Congress, and the First Lady has recommended that Congress give the survivors more of an audience, but they got one yesterday. And what occurred to me watching this is you have Democrats on the House Committee on Oversight who have found a voice, even though they're in the minority. They have staged high-profile things. They have moved things on the Epstein files. They seem to have drawn some bipartisan votes in the committee to free up more things involving Epstein. Things seem different in that committee this year. What's your reporting tell you?
Yeah, no, all of these investigative committees are now realizing, okay, we don't have the subpoena power, as you alluded to earlier. We don't have the gavels. There's only so much that we can do. Why not hold shadow hearings, as we call them up here? Why not try and continue to investigate despite we don't need the Republicans to agree to hold a hearing up here on Capitol Hill. Let's go and find the survivors. Let's go out into the public. And this is happening across a number of committees. And the reason why is because Democrats know that if they take back the gavels, again, Trump's going to be president, and they already have a list, I'm told, like literally lists, writing down of all of the different things that the administration has done. They're starting to investigate it now so that they're not caught flat-footed on day one. They want to just hit the ground running, start these investigations, start subpoenaing people, and actually hold hearings on Capitol Hill. Again, draft those bills, potentially hold people in contempt of Congress. Who knows? They don't want to waste time, and that's a lesson learned from the last majority. They want to start working now.
Mariana, thanks for the extra time with us today.
Of
Learned a
course.
lot. I learned a lot. It's always a good sign. Back on 5:35 in just a moment. Please stay here. We've got a lot more to come in the minutes ahead.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org. There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535. You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
It's 5:35. Scott McFarlane, Midas Touch Network, going to make some news in the minutes ahead. I want you to stay here. Coming up shortly. What about this $29 billion price tag that the Pentagon has so far put on the war in Iran? A number that is likely to balloon and balloon quickly, and the Pentagon's going to be coming back here soon for more money. We have a top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, the military veteran who represents, among other things, West Point. Pat Ryan is going to join us with a sense of what Democrats are planning to do about that as the war drags down approval numbers across the board. Also coming up, Jared Moskowitz represents Florida, coastal Florida, and he has figured out a magic trick in this particular 535. He's got a bipartisan bill that would revise the U.S. Secret Service in the wake of not one or two, but as we mentioned earlier, 3 attempted assassinations on President Trump. Revamping the Secret Service now has the attention of both parties. Mariana Sotomayor stays with us as we bring in Jared Moskowitz. Mr. Moskowitz, come on in, sir.
Hello, sir.
Good to see you.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good to
Pleasure,
see you.
pleasure.
I got some good news for you to start off with.
Okay,
We have a
good
nice
news.
wide picture here.
Okay.
If you could just hold up the shoes for a second, though, sir.
Yes.
Jared Moskowitz is chair of the Congressional Sneaker Caucus, a responsibility he takes seriously. He does not chair the House Flexibility Caucus,
No, I'm not.
but he does.
An acrobat, I'm not. There we go.
We could start a yoga
Nice.
caucus at some
These
point
are new
too.
fives.
These
Yes.
are fantastic, by the way. New fives.
New fives.
And
It's for sale right now on Nike.com.
well done.
I like how you've matched your outfit. The
Oh,
blue
thank
to
you.
the very
I
light
start with
blue
the
for those
shoes.
who
I
can't
start,
see.
I start with the
should.
shoes.
Represents Boca Raton and the rest of beautiful coastal Florida.
Yep.
And I want to talk to you about this bill about Secret Service. Mariana and I were talking about the uniqueness of finding a bipartisan coalition on anything, and you seem to have started one on the bill. So tell us both what the bill does, first of all, and then we'll ask how you move it forward.
Well, so I've been talking about DHS reform for really since I got up here, starting with FEMA, because that obviously is my background in emergency management, talking to former FEMA administrators during the first Trump administration that I worked with when I was the director of emergency management in Florida, and then in the Biden administration being up here in Congress, and I heard the same thing about how FEMA was having a hard time getting decisions made at Homeland. Homeland was slowing them down as
Bureaucracy.
a giant bureaucracy, right? And FEMA needs to be quick. Emergency management, you got to make quick decisions, right? Speed is the name of the game. And then after the assassination attempt against President Trump in Butler, I was appointed to the assassination task force. And in that investigation, what I saw is the same problems that existed in response after 9/11. We were seeing the same issues 20 years later. These were issues Homeland was supposed to fix, and Secret Service was having, radios throttling. They were on incompatible systems. That's what we heard in the response to 9/11. And so, talking to the Secret Service people, one of the smallest agencies within Homeland, I heard the same problem. We can't get decisions, we can't get attention, we're so small. And then obviously as we went through the shutdown, I'm looking at what's going on with TSA, and I'm thinking to myself, well, TSA used to be in transportation. We have the FAA, which is, obviously safety in the skies. We have TSA, which is safety in the ground. Why not unify them and send that back to transportation? And so I came up with these 3 bills as a reform package of Homeland. This is all about government efficiency. We spent, the good first year of the Trump administration on that. Didn't do a lot of it. But this actually would make government more efficient. And that's why you see a bipartisan group of Republicans coming on these bills with me. There is an understanding from the Democrats and the Republicans and the White House, by the way, that Homeland has become too big, too bureaucratic, too many agencies. We don't need dramatic reform, but look, taking a couple agencies out, and obviously Secret Service specifically with a focus on security, where hate has become $1 trillion industry now, around the world on social media platforms. And so, wanting to keep this president safe, the next president safe, the cabinet safe, members of Congress, Supreme Court, you name it. I think being able to do that, giving Secret Service to the White House, I think would allow them to make much faster decisions, to help keep the president safe.
Is that, giving the Secret Service to the White House, you saying that, I can already think of a number of your Democratic colleagues who might have pause to that, simply because they see who is in the White House right now. They think, oh my gosh, that person could abuse it. We think about, Secret Service funding. We're also now talking about other kinds of funding, so $1 billion, all of that. How are you selling this? Or we're definitely going to get to how, Republicans, you're selling it to Republicans, but how are you selling that internally among Democrats, especially if, let's say, you all are afforded the majority next term and this doesn't get done under this 119th Congress?
No, it's a great question. Someone said to me, well, what if he just makes the Secret Service his private police force? And my answer back to them was, if he wanted to do that now, you don't think he would do that now? Look, ICE is not at the White House. ICE is in Homeland, right? So, this idea that this is giving Trump some additional power that he doesn't have now, I don't believe. Additionally, it would take at least a year, right, to do the transition. Okay, that even if we pass the bill tomorrow, it's not like Secret Service is just at the White House. There's a huge transition that has to take place, and that would take a year. So really, this is not something that could be immediately instituted. It's really about on a go-forward basis, not necessarily the current administration.
Okay. Let me ask you how you start the conversation with Republicans at this moment in time, this uniquely toxic moment in time. You've got Russell Fry of South Carolina as a co-sponsor, as a sponsor with you on this. How do you initiate the conversation successfully? Because a lot of your colleagues don't know how to do that, to go across the aisle and find somebody to find a team with.
Yeah, look, I got Russell Fry on that bill. I got, Byron Donalds running for governor of Florida on the FEMA Independence Act, and I got Tim Burchett on the TSA bill.
What's the technique?
Going and talking to them. I just went up to them and said, hey, look, I know we've talked about Homeland before. I want to take Secret Service out of Homeland with everything going on. Hey, send me the bill, let my staff look at it, let's have a conversation. And that's it. I go and approach them. Now, it's easy to approach people that you haven't said are traitors, right? And, so, look, if you're out there and you're another member and you want to work with the other side, if you say that, they hate God and, you use every, terrible word in the dictionary, they're never going to work with you. Right? If you say, these people, they're terrible parents, they're never going to work with you. So look, I criticize the other side plenty. I'm all over the internet criticizing it, but I try to make sure that it's never personal, so that way, we can work on a bipartisan basis. And with gerrymandering going on and getting rid of all the moderates, in 26 and doing it again in 28, because mid-cycle redistricting now is clearly it's here to stay. It'll be much, much harder. You think it's hard now? Give it another cycle or two. It'll be almost impossible to
worry
make
about
any
that?
deal.
You come back here, and you have nobody to broker with because everything's been redrawn.
Yeah, I'm deeply worried about how Article 1, right, of the Constitution, before the executive branch, how we in Congress, we've done it to ourselves on a bipartisan basis. We have weakened the branch that we all belong to, okay? We've given the executive so much rulemaking because we don't want to take votes anymore. We don't want to pass laws. I think it's been a real mistake that we've done that. I think in this administration, I think Speaker Johnson has sped that process up in dramatic fashion. Apparently now we don't declare wars anymore in Congress. So the only thing we have left is we pass budgets, and then we have to renew some of these, bills, FAA, Farm Bill. We have to renew these things, but otherwise, we can't pass anything. I'm really worried about where Congress is going to be in 2 to 4 years.
Given that that's the reality now and potentially could get worse, you're still, again, introducing legislation, working across the aisle to make sure you can put a product forward. What's the pathway to actually making sure it gets on the floor? Is it this method we've seen time and time again, just tack on a number of bills into this, what becomes a bigger package of legislation? How are you thinking about this bill in particular and making sure changes are made?
Well, that's a good question. Look, my FEMA Independence Act, which I filed with Beyer and Donalds, early on, the Transportation Committee wound up taking that and putting it in a larger package, which was a FEMA reform package that passed the committee and is waiting the floor. I think what we really need is we need a homeland reform bill, right? There needs to be some sort of homeland reform bill, and then other things can get in it, because it's very hard to move these things as individual pieces of legislation. But we also need to get the conversation going, because everyone has been talking about homeland for years now, and Congress needs to just get out of its own way. We're very good at getting in our own way, but I thought I ran for Congress to pass legislation. I thought that was the whole idea. We came up here to make laws, to change people's lives, right, to make government better. I thought that's what we ran for. Apparently, I wanted to run in a Congress of 10 years ago because this Congress doesn't like doing that anymore. But I'm real concerned that if we don't fight for the Article 1 legislative branch, you think this is dysfunctional now. Give it 2 to 4 years.
How do you explain that to voters back home who are reasonably wondering, where is Congress?
Have you seen our approval rating?
Yeah, it's bad.
Okay.
How do you explain that to people?
And by the way, you think the Republican approval rating is bad? The Republican approval rating is only being beaten by the Democratic approval rating, which is lower.
They don't trust you guys on a number of issues.
Yet they're willing to give us power because they see what's going on here and they say this is ridiculous. We need some brakes on what's going on. No, listen again. We deserve those approval ratings. We deserve it. We did it to ourselves. We've done it. No one else did this to us. So, the American people right now have no faith in Congress, and deservedly so. That doesn't mean there isn't good people up here trying to right the ship, trying to figure out how to make this place work. We're just dramatically outnumbered by the people who never want to work together.
Before you leave, we're required to ask you a fun question.
Okay.
There's a list of fun questions.
List of fun questions.
I'm going off the list. I'm going off the list.
Just random?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us about the sneaker caucus. It's a bipartisan thing you've done since you got here.
Yeah.
Explain what the hell that is.
Well, so obviously I like sneakers. And
you wear them well.
I wear them well. I have a lot of sneakers. And so the way it started is I met with Hakeem Jeffries when I first ran, as a candidate. And I showed up, I was all dressed, I had a tie on, and I had very fancy shoes on. And I got there and he was wearing sneakers. And I was like, I made like a quip. I was like, oh, leader, if I knew I could wear sneakers, I would have worn sneakers today. And he goes, fun fact, on the House floor, you can wear sneakers because the only requirement is that it be closed-toed shoes. And I was like, really? I was like, I have a ton of sneakers. He's like, well, if you want to wear sneakers, you should do that. Go wear your sneakers. because I was talking about how, like, I just remember as being a kid, and my dad, who had passed away a couple months before I ran for office, you know, would bring me to the mall to get new sneakers when I was a kid, and the mall would be closed and the line would be outside, and then the mall would open and everyone would run to Foot Locker, you know, and the gates would be down. And you'd
nice,
see all,
Foot Locker mall reference, that's strong.
Yeah, you'd see, remember the metal gates would be down, you'd be outside the metal gates, and you would see all the shoes like lined up by size, and then the gates would come on and everyone would run in, you'd put the shoes on, you'd buy them, and then that was it. Like when they were gone, they were gone. There was no resale market, restocking, like that was it. And then if you showed up to school wearing, you know, the new pair of Jordans, I mean, you know, it became like a talking point. So I just remember that, like, from my childhood. And so when I was talking to Hakeem about it, he was like, you should do that. So I started wearing sneakers up here, you know, and everyone was like, oh my God, you know, what are you doing? Like, you know, what about tradition? And I was like, well, we don't wear powdered wigs here anymore. You know, like styles change.
But you're talking at least.
Yeah.
You're having a conversation.
Yeah, and so, you know, I started doing that. Other members came up to me, they're like, oh, I have sneakers. Like, I'm gonna start wearing them, and then it just became a thing. And now there's probably like 100 members wearing sneakers. Some of them obviously are medically necessary, but you know, other people are doing it for fashion. And staff is all in sneakers. When young people come to Capitol Hill to learn about government, they're all in sneakers. All the high school trips, they're all in sneakers. The college kids are all in sneakers. You know, that changed after COVID. It's a generational shift. As we get younger up here, fashions are gonna change, right? And so you're seeing it in corporate America. You're starting to see it here on Capitol Hill.
All of us who work the Hill on the marble floors all day appreciate your leadership.
You're welcome.
You're
welcome. Well, that could be my legacy up here. You know, if I can, there's one thing I can do. Be like, I remember that guy who started with the sneakers.
Thank you. Jared Moskowitz, thanks for running down the hall for us. Good to see you.
Of course, thanks
Jared
for having
Moskowitz represents Florida, and we'll be back in a moment. You're watching 535. We appreciate you.
America's Vet Dogs is a national nonprofit empowering veterans, first responders, and active duty service members facing both visible and hidden disabilities through the placement of a highly trained service dog. However, recipients never bear the financial burden. You can be a part of making a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and first responders in need. Learn more by visiting vetdogs.org.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said, done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to the
Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
Welcome to 535. My name is Brody Mullins. One of the unique things about the 535 is we talk to the movers and shakers behind legislation on Capitol Hill. Today we've got Matt Johnson and Brian Crawford. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
So tell us about how you guys use the media and how often you guys are up on Capitol Hill trying to talk to lawmakers or talk to staff.
Capitol Hill is where we do our business for the most part. When we're not working the executive branch, we are here working all 535 members, both sides of the aisle.
Brian?
Same for us. I represent the beer industry. There's a brewery in every single congressional district, and so we want to make sure that both sides of the aisle know the economic importance of beer.
And how much is your work done on Capitol Hill versus back in people's districts?
Equally both. We have lobbyists and contract lobbyists like Matt that come up here and represent our industries. Our brands have their own lobbyists, but we spend a lot of time back in the district allowing members of Congress to meet voters. Our workers are their constituents, and they want to know those issues. It's a huge part of our role.
And Matt, I know you like staying behind the scenes yourself, but How do you use the media to get your clients' messages out there?
Yeah, so for our clients, it's really important that they are in the news when they need to be and not in the news when they don't need to be. And so, it really depends upon the issue, depends upon, just how salient we need them to be out there.
Being a prominent Capitol Hill staffer, how important was it for you to get your member out in the media themselves, and how hard was it to do that?
Yeah, I think, as you said, for senators, they pretty much have to fight off microphones. For House members, they need to make news, and sometimes it's bringing issues to them that can help them connect with their constituents.
And give us the House perspective on that one.
Certainly a lot more difficult for a rank and file House member to get media coverage. Our comm shop worked extra to try to get the members out in front. They would generate, as Matt said, they would try to generate media, whether it was legislation or something that they were doing for back at home. We would proactively reach out to our local press, our TV, our print, and make sure that they knew about it. So it was a harder job on the House side, but certainly an important role.
As a House member, are you even trying to get on national media, or is that lost?
I think it's, if you're a chairman, a ranking member, if you're covering a key committee, my bosses were, one was on appropriations, another was on judiciary. They were taking on some pretty prominent issues, and so they were able to generate some news media. Oftentimes they didn't want it though. If it was a controversial issue, you want to keep your head down. I was up here during Obamacare, the rise of the Tea Party. It was fascinating. You would go to town halls where normally a town hall would have 15 people and it would have thousands of people. So it was sort of the rise of social media, the rise of the Tea Party, all these confluence of factors where the media really were driving the agenda, and the members were sort of being swept into it.
So who was the hardest lawmaker to track down to get in front of?
So my Democratic colleagues, we're a bipartisan firm, my Democratic colleagues will say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, not because she is so in demand, which I think she is, but because she doesn't take meetings with lobbyists.
What about for the beer industry?
Beer is a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue, and generally speaking, members like to get together over a cold beer. I wish they would do it a little bit more, so we're working on that.
Well, thanks for joining us on 535.
Welcome back. This is 535. I'm your host, Susan Davis, and I am joined now by Stephanie Woodward, a disabilities advocate who is spending the day on Capitol Hill advocating for many causes. Stephanie, we were just talking before the camera started rolling. You've got a lot on your plate up here. Talk through what you're advocating for, and specifically who you're talking to.
Absolutely. So our goal is to ensure that wheelchair users have the technology that they need to live our best lives. We can't do that without having the wheelchairs that fit our bodies. So we actually have 3 issues that we're focusing on right now. Our first one is Choices for Increased Mobility Act. That is a bill that would allow an individual who uses a manual wheelchair to pay for the upgrade to a lighter weight wheelchair. So right now a lot of manual wheelchairs are made out of aluminum, but there are lighter options, such as titanium and carbon fiber.
Which sounds expensive.
It's expensive, but right now the rule for Medicare is you're not allowed to pay for the upgrade. They will pay for your chair, but if you want to switch out from an aluminum to like a carbon fiber, they say, well, then pay for the whole chair yourself.
And what does that cost?
That can be a difference of thousands of dollars. A manual wheelchair can be about $7,000, but if you're just paying for that upgrade, it would be less than $2,000. That can be a make or break, particularly for people with disabilities.
So Medicare won't let you pay for the upgrade?
They will not let you.
It's an active policy to prevent a consumer from doing that.
Absolutely. So what we're looking for is just the ability to pay. We're not asking Medicare to pay for the additional upgrade. We're just asking them to make it the policy that we can pay. So this really impacts my life personally. My husband is a manual wheelchair user. So he used to be a professional athlete and he has a racing wheelchair. Our racing wheelchairs are really long. They have 3 wheels. And it's carbon fiber. And it's carbon fiber because he had to pay out of pocket for it. Whereas his everyday chair that he uses is not carbon fiber. Even though his racing chair is significantly bigger, It is lighter than the chair he sits in every single day.
Can you give me a sense of what a chair like that might weigh?
A chair that he's sitting in today is around 24 pounds.
Significant.
Carbon fiber is on average 30 to 50% lighter. And while that might not sound like a lot, you have to imagine that my husband is lifting his wheelchair upwards of 18 times a day. To take our kids to the Y, he has to get in the car, get out of the car, take them in, get back in the car, get out of the car to go to work. So it's a lot of in and out of the vehicle, and every single time he has to lift his chair, which can result in a lot of shoulder injuries. And if you're living in your wheelchair every single day of your life, that means that your shoulders can go out when you're 35, 40, and imagine how would he roll around without his shoulders. We can't take time out of our day to have rotator cuff surgery. We have triplets that are less than 2 years old. I don't have time for him to be out of commission.
I don't have time for triplets. That is
right.
That
And
is
when you
a lot
have
of
triplets,
kids.
you don't have the
Yeah.
money to pay $7,000 for
sure.
the wheelchair. When if this legislation passed, we'd only have to pay $1,500. That's a significant savings when I got all these kids to send to college.
So that's one component of what you're up here for. I think you said there was 3 prongs to it. What's the second?
So there's 2 others. The other one is power standing. So the wheelchair I'm sitting in right now has what we call seat elevation. That's how I'm able to be at an eye level with you right now. So this technology is
can
called
go
eye
up and
level,
down,
up and down. Whereas if I didn't have this, I would be down here looking up at you. It's straining my neck, all of that. So for years, we asked CMS to approve coverage for both.
CMS being the Centers for Medicaid.
Yes, Centers for Medicare and Medicare Services. So we asked them to approve both the seat elevation and power standing. So power standing is similar, but it allows a wheelchair user to be in an upward standing position, which can be really great for just living life, making pasta in your kitchen.
Does your chair do that?
My chair does not do that because right now it's not covered. So they did approve coverage for seat elevation, but not for power standing. And power standing has other great health benefits besides being able to be up here with everyone else, being able to have that circulation in your body,
blood flow,
being able to put weight on your legs to help with things like transferring, getting dressed. There's so many benefits, but for some reason, CMS has allowed for seat elevation to move forward and be covered, but not power standing. So we're not even asking them to change the rules. We're just asking them to start the process. Let us prove to you that this should be covered. So what we're asking from Congress is to call CMS, encourage them to open this up for conversation so that we can get this process going so that people who are actually needing power standing can get it. Because honestly, having the technology you need to live your life shouldn't be like winning the lottery.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to be lucky to get what you need.
Especially as technology, I think, is advancing at such a steady pace that it can really improve day-to-day life in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And what has been frustrating is for years people have said, well, it's a nice add-on, but it's not medically necessary. And the argument that it's not medically necessary is, well, it didn't exist before.
Sure.
Just because it doesn't exist before does not mean it's not medically necessary now. Like, how do we progress as a society if we say anything that's new isn't actually required? Like, then I suppose computers aren't necessary because they didn't exist at
or
one
any other
point in
kind
the
of
past.
health treatments,
That
healthcare
doesn't
treatments, yeah.
make sense, right?
So what's the third prong?
The third prong is Medicare Advantage. So within Medicare, there's traditional Medicare and then there's Medicare Advantage. Right now, if my wheelchair breaks and I have Medicare, I can get it fixed without prior authorization from insurance. Okay. Prior authorization can take up to 28 days. If I have Medicare Advantage, I have to have prior authorization, which makes no sense because both of them are Medicare. And what's really important with that is about 30% of Medicare Advantage enrollees are people who are Black, Brown, or Asian and living with $24,000 or less annually in comparison to those who are on Medicare. They also report poor health outcomes. So we are taking a population that is already marginalized and having disadvantages and telling them you have to wait longer to get your wheelchair fixed. Not only is that just absolutely ridiculous, it doesn't make sense, but it can have cascading health consequences. If I can't move around in my wheelchair, I'm laying in bed. If I'm laying in bed, I can get a pressure sore. And studies have shown that it can cost Medicare upwards of $100,000 to help one person heal from a pressure sore when they were waiting on prior authorization for less than a $500 fix to their wheelchair.
Do you have a sense, do you know how large a population of people these policies affect?
Significant. In fact, there are quite literally millions. So in California, there's 3.1 million people on Medicare Advantage. In New York, there's, I want to say, 1.8 million. So there's quite literally millions of people who are on Medicare Advantage, and at any time,
I mean specifically that use wheelchairs.
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can tell you that when you're the person in the wheelchair waiting, you don't really care how many other people are waiting.
Yeah.
You care that you can't get out of your bed right now because you're waiting on insurance to tell you whether or not you can get your wheelchair fixed. And prior authorization, you have to remember the point of prior authorization is to ensure that it is medically necessary, safe, and cost effective. We already know that the wheelchair is medically necessary because you were prescribed the wheelchair. We already know it's safe for you. And 98% of these that go through prior authorization are approved. So there is no cost savings here. It's not like you're catching a lot of wrongdoing. 98% are approved. So it's just a process that is causing more harm for no good reason.
It's interesting because the problems you're trying to fix that you've outlined, in some ways they sound like just inefficiencies in a system.
Significant.
And does this require, do you need Congress to pass a law, or do you need Congress to tell CMS change your rules?
So for two of these, for the power standing and for the Medicare Advantage, we're just asking Congress to pick up the phone and call CMS and say, what are you doing? This makes no sense, change the rule. It can be a very easy internal fix. We don't have to go through all of these steps that it would take to pass legislation. It can just be a simple fix.
Who are you talking to up here? What is it like? Talk a little bit about your day and who you've been talking to on the Hill and what that process is like.
So we've been talking to a lot of staffers, different members of Congress, bipartisan, to really demonstrate that this is not a partisan issue. Being a person with a disability that needs technology shouldn't matter which party you're in. Like, it matters, can I get out of bed? Can I get the technology I need? If your legs weren't working, should you have to wait for insurance to tell you in 28 days whether or not you can get the care you need to start walking again? Because that's what so many people with wheelchairs are doing. We are waiting for a letter. And I need you to keep in mind, once you get that letter, that doesn't mean your wheelchair is fixed.
Sure.
That just means
you
can move to the next step in the process. So that means people are waiting more than 60 days. We could cut half of that wait time out if we just got rid of prior authorization.
What has the reception been like up here? I mean, these sound like problems that would probably have a lot of support in Congress to fix.
Honestly, we've had really positive meetings for the past day or two. Like, everyone we've met with has seemed to understand the issue and seemed to understand how simple of a fix it should be, and has been really supportive of making those calls. A lot have been asking for sign-on letters that they can really show that support in writing as well. So that leaves us feeling really good, confident, and hopeful that wheelchair users are finally going to be able to get access to what they need.
It sounds like in some ways you're running more of an awareness campaign versus a lobbying campaign. It doesn't take a lot of persuasion to say, hey, we should make this life easier for Americans in wheelchairs, that they just don't know that the problem even exists.
Sometimes it's that they don't know that the problem exists, and sometimes when you just have a real wheelchair user in front of you saying, this is impacting me, it can hit differently, and they start to see, like, there are real people on the other side of this. This isn't just an issue with invisible people being impacted. Me, my husband, is not being able to lift his own chair in and out of his car. And I can show you pictures of my husband and our kids who are all impacted because of a very silly rule that he can't pay for an upgrade.
Yeah. Who are your champions up here? Do you have members of Congress who are particularly willing to go to bat for this?
I will say that I will always appreciate Senator Duckworth for all of her efforts. As a wheelchair user, she really does understand our issues. She's been an incredible champion, and I can only hope that more wheelchair users become members of Congress, because once you have that kind of awareness, things can move a lot quicker. And I think that other members of Congress respect the issues because they have a colleague that is living it.
Could you share a little bit about your story? How did you become an advocate for this issue, and what brought you into it?
Absolutely. So I've been a wheelchair user my whole life, and I have always been a zealous advocate. When I was in third grade, my music teacher told me I shouldn't be able to use the ramp because I might hurt the other kids, which I thought was interesting, and that's when my dad introduced me to the concept of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I went to law school, and when I was in law school, I got introduced to the power wheelchair industry, and that there's lots of disability rights groups working with manufacturers who are making these chairs, because the manufacturers, honestly, they're not in business if I don't need the chair, so they really do care about the end user. And I appreciate that they're willing to help different end users come here to talk about the issues, because it's very different from the person who sells the wheelchairs talking about it versus the person who is using it. So I got involved in this because it impacts my everyday life, from manual wheelchairs that my husband is using to power wheelchairs that I'm using. our lives don't function if our wheelchairs don't function.
Are you a lifelong advocate? Do you have a day job, or is this your full-time job?
So my day job is I run an organization called Disability Empower Network. We're an organization run by and for girls and women with disabilities. We help disabled girls become confident to be leaders. We want more disabled girls to grow up into women who are more like Tammy Duckworth. We want more people in this world just leading. We want disabled women in all forms of leadership, because I think the world will be a better place when more women are in charge, and definitely disabled women.
Can I ask you one just big picture question before
Absolutely.
we close? As someone who's worked in the disability rights advocacy movement your whole life, what would you say right now in America the disability experience is like? Do you feel like disability rights are really respected? Do you feel like there is a lot more work to do? I mean, the ADA is obviously a very champion piece of legislation. How far have they come?
I think we've come far, but I like to remind people that the ADA was never a suggestion, and a lot of people still think that disability rights are a nice to have rather than a mandate and a requirement. It is not a nicety for you to respect my rights. It's the law, and the ADA really set a very low bar. I think that we should continue to enforce the ADA, but also expand disability rights. There are people right now living in institutions because our system allows them to be forced into nursing facilities rather than allowing them to get the support they need to live in the community. There's so much work left to be done, and sometimes it's hard to see if you're not living it, but once you become disabled, suddenly those issues are at the forefront.
Stephanie Woodward, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for coming on 535 and sharing your story with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there, and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family, because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
Hi. Hi. So we're now at our 3rd job together.
I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way.
You're like the house expert. So
you're like the Congress expert. I only learn from you. And now we get to do this together.
I know. We get to do 535, which is a fantastic, creative, exciting little project.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of excited to talk to leaders in a different capacity. We always ask them about, do they have the votes? What do their members think about this and that? But what is actually the policy that matters to them personally?
Love it.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said, done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs
rather than watchdogs?
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to the Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
Welcome back. This is 535. I'm Susan Davis, and I'm joined by my colleague, Scott McFarlane. How are you doing, Scott?
Oh, this is fantastic, by the way.
This is our first time on camera together.
This is a sneaky cool part of Capitol Hill that we have claimed ownership of, that anybody who brings tour groups, they got to come here because this is this total spirit of Congress. This is where you can literally walk up to any member of Congress, because they're all circulating here, and share your thoughts and kind of enjoy the ambiance of the Capitol.
This is the Hollywood shot.
This is
what people
we're the
think
Hollywood
Washington.
shooters too. Like we're the people who should be in the Hollywood shot.
You've had a couple of really interesting conversations with lawmakers today. Let's start with your most recent. You talked to Jared Moskowitz, who is a Democrat who seems to have serious concerns about the president's safety.
He's got a Secret Service bill that would move the Secret Service to a degree under the White House's supervision, because there's a bureaucracy issue that he's seeing, that other members are seeing as well, that's not working because they have these near misses and the colossal failure in Butler, Pennsylvania, that they think necessitates ridding it of some of its bureaucracy. Moving it under the White House would be one way Moskowitz thinks of doing that. But I think the broader picture is that he's found a bipartisan coalition on something at this moment in time. And I think it is a unifying force. The metastasizing, pernicious number of threats that elected officials are facing now, by orders of magnitude more than just a few years ago, mixed with what we've seen against the president in the last 4 years, has created this critical mass where they want to do something to beef up security, but they want to do more than just throw money at it. They want to do something that's a little bit more judicious and smart with resources. They're giving that a try, but I think it speaks to the broader picture that they're concerned about threats against elected officials, big and small, local and federal, and this is one way of approaching it.
You know, I am old enough to actually have covered the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, and when they moved the Secret Service out of the Treasury Department, where it used to reside, into DHS. And that was a really controversial move 25 years ago. So the idea of the bureaucracy and where the Secret Service should reside in the government is not new here. There's a lot of people who think the Secret Service has been inefficiently run for a very long time, and prior to these alleged attempts at the president's life.
Yeah, Secret Service also still had that counterfeiting mission, so being part of Treasury was hard to divorce itself from, and respectfully, moving any federal agency around causes a turf war. And some of those institutional constraints, I think, are what feed a lot of the bureaucracy that Congressman Moskowitz thinks is part of the problem.
I want to stop you there because we're going to be joined by Congressman Pat Ryan, and we're going to give him a second to get comfortable in his chair because we've got a lot to discuss.
Yeah. We have some OSHA violations here, but thanks for bearing with us. Good to have you here.
Sorry I'm late.
It's okay.
Guys, how are you?
We're used to lawmakers running late, where it's something we're very skilled at dancing around.
But it is true.
Congressman, thank you for coming on 535.
Yeah. Congrats on launching this.
It's been fun. It's been going really well so far, and I think we've been really enjoying the conversations we're having with lawmakers because we're getting a chance to kind of really go deep on some of these important issues. And I think right now you're here to discuss something incredibly important, which is the U.S. war with Iran.
Yeah.
And what exactly is the role that you would like to see Congress playing right now, which has very, very clearly taken a back seat in letting the administration make these decisions?
I'm happy to talk about the process and the roles, which matters, but we've got to start from a place of America's less safe, and costs have obviously skyrocketed for every single American because of this war. Yeah. And while the American people, my constituents, care about the process, they care much more about the outcome. And I think sometimes we get caught in the process around here. It's one of my frustration points of the last few years in Congress. That being said, obviously if the Congress had been consulted, I think the wisdom of our founders and framers of asking the hard questions, particularly before we go to war, the most serious, grave decision that the country makes, I would hope that some of these points would have come out. For example, have we thought about the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and what is the plan to mitigate that? Have we really assessed whether it's realistic that there will be organized opposition and regime change, as the president claimed that first night, which obviously the opposite has happened. So I do think this is where the process matters, and the back and forth would have either prevented us from making what I think is a very bad decision that we're now stuck in this war, or at a minimum, us conducting it more effectively and linking what has been real tactical success by our military, no doubt, to some larger strategic success, which we have not obviously had to this point.
There was some congressional oversight that pried free some budget estimates of what this has been costing taxpayers. We learned yesterday from the Appropriations Committee it's roughly $29 billion, though you and I have spoken about that. You've got some cynicism that number is accurate. Let's put that aside for a moment. From your constituents, which include the constituents of West Point, they concerned about that part of it yet? Or is that a next level concern, the taxpayer exposure? Yeah.
Oh, taxpayers are incredibly concerned about the cost of this war.
They are asking you about that.
Absolutely, both directly in terms of why are our gas prices near double what they were before this started, and why are we, when we have such needs here at home on healthcare, on housing, on food costs, on all the costs that the American people are bearing, why are we spending billions of dollars on a war that, unfortunately, when you look at the polling, I'm sure you guys have seen it, I mean, this is as unpopular a war 2 months in, or more than 2 months in, as Vietnam and Iraq were at the worst of their support. And that makes me sad. And the cost component of that is a huge reason why.
That's one of the drivers.
It is the driver. I think theoretical support for war is always higher than when you actually explain both the direct and indirect costs. And those costs also don't factor in, for example, the toll on our VA and what we'll have to pay to care for the veterans impacted in this war, however long it goes on. So I think that is a very low ball estimate on
what do you think would make it go higher? What do you think's being missed in the picture as they paint for the economic impact?
Well, I think they're defining it very, very narrowly around operational funds expended. They're not factoring in damage to weapons, to aircraft, to bases, which we've seen now wide public reporting on. They're not factoring in those indirect costs of what does this mean for recruitment? And we've seen recruitment numbers start to dip as the war is increasingly unpopular, and that has a cost. What does this mean for the long tail of healthcare for veterans that are affected by this physically and mentally? None of those costs are factored in. When you look at Iraq, it's trillions of dollars in Iraq, trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, and obviously the goal here is to not repeat those painfully long and costly wars.
Can I ask you about, I've talked to even Republican lawmakers who will concede that the president did not do enough on the front end to make a public case for why this had to happen. For instance, coming to Congress and talking about it. Do you think there was any case the president could have made that would have convinced Congress to support action in Iran? Or do you think that there is no support in the Congress to be doing what the president is doing right now?
I think there's a reason why past presidents for 3 decades plus of both parties have not chosen direct military confrontation as the way to achieve the goal which we all share, which is a better, more democratic regime and a non-nuclear, certainly, regime in Iran. And some of the most hawkish Republican presidents wisely chose not to do that, and now we're seeing why. So I think the bar was very high, and they knew that. I think the administration knew the bar would be high, knew the public would rightly be skeptical, and rather than doing the work, they just tried to essentially shortcut the Constitution, and now we are where we are.
Obviously, you don't support the president's actions, but also you'd like to see the U.S. win regardless. Do you see a way out of this in which the U.S. can declare victory? Because there doesn't seem like a lot of clear, easy ways out for the U.S. government here.
No, and this is what clearly the president is wrestling with as he realizes we're stuck and he's grasping and flailing. Sometimes the least bad option is to stop the damage and pull back and reassess. I think we need to immediately end this war, bring back the troops that we've surged, bring the spending down, reassess. Continuing to follow the money we spent with more money is literally how we got to our 2 longest wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And while this is a different scenario in a lot of ways, the macro situation is the same. The president, remember, this is going to be a few weeks. Now we're into months, and they continue to incrementally ask for more while giving no justification for how that will change the calculus of the Iranian regime in any way.
Pull back the curtain for us just a moment. The House Armed Services Committee has this unique tradition of being arguably the most bipartisan panel that's here.
Yeah.
Is it functioning that way now? Because we're obviously in a distinctive moment where our politics are charged. We're also in a middle war. How's it going behind the scenes?
It has been a place of optimism for me to be on the committee and see it actually remain largely bipartisan, or at least, functional, respectful, focused on a larger mission above the partisanship. I think that's certainly being tested or frayed right now. Chairman Rogers is really good about this. I really give him and Ranking Member Smith, they really do a tremendous amount of work to keep that going. There was a moment a few weeks ago where Chairman Rogers, to his credit, came out in an unexpected way publicly and said, we are not getting the transparency we need from DOD, and that had a real effect on, I think, the administration realizing
it prodded them.
It prodded them in the short term.
Yeah.
They've now reverted back to obfuscation and no transparency, including to Republicans, and that's obviously a problem. And unfortunately, as the situation gets worse, sort of materially and militarily, I think their inclination to hide is going to go up. But we're still holding. We're 60 plus years passing a bipartisan defense bill, and we have to continue to do that. It's just too important. I mean, I think about like the cadets that I represent and the military leaders at West Point. We owe them that. I mean, we certainly owe them that.
What's the reaction you're getting from that part of your constituency? I mean, you have this distinctive part of America. You have the Mid-Hudson Valley, which includes West Point and the military academy.
The best part of America.
One could argue it's the best part of America. We say that to all the members of the country. Yeah. What is it? Are they concerned about recruitment? Are they concerned about tax on their resources? I'm trying to get a sense of what's different that you're hearing that maybe your colleagues aren't.
Yeah. Well, I'll say I've had some pretty stunning conversations with cadets since this war started. I've been there twice since the war started, and they are really wrestling with this on the grand strategic military level. Like, was this a sound decision to expend over half of our critical munitions in this theater and make us weak vis-a-vis China? And they're wrestling with us on the moral level of, the president's, I was there the day after he had tweeted about destroying their entire civilization. We have an entire semester-long course on the law of war and ethics in war and just war theory. And so these brilliant, patriotic young people are really seeing this all play out. And it actually gives me a lot of faith. They are very thoughtful about it, way more thoughtful than this administration is. So,
can I ask you about military readiness? Because one of the consequences of this action in Iran, especially coupled with U.S. support for Ukraine, is it, at least as I have read, it has really drawn down U.S. military capacity. Yeah. How serious of a concern is that for you? And as a layman to this world, how long does it take to build up missile capacities and other defense capacities? Is it months? Is it years?
This is a really underappreciated aspect of the harm of this war, and why I said it makes the country less safe, not just directly. The most striking example, and I actually questioned one of the senior DoD leaders about this in a hearing a few weeks ago, in the first 10 days of Epic Fury, the war in Iran, we expended such great numbers of several critical interceptor defensive munitions that it will take us up to 10 years to recoup up to those levels of interceptors.
It's like unfathomable.
In 10 days, we expended what could take, and if we speed up, and we're working to speed up our production, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3, but in 10 days, at our current rate, to 10 years, that's stunning. And especially this week, as the president is on his way to China, China sees that, Russia sees that, all of our adversaries see that, and that is that's a blinking, bright red light problem for the country. And that was also not considered, although we know Chairman the Joint Chiefs, Kane, did warn, based on public reporting anyway, warn the president about this, and I guess he ignored it, which is stunning.
Well, the defense industry will always say, give us more money, we need to build more weapons.
Sure.
But there was also a significant amount of money in Ukraine aid. Do you remember there was a lot of opposition to supporting Ukraine, but most of that money was actually going to U.S. manufacturers to build up these defense reserves. To that I mean, is there enough money already in the pipeline to do this, or do you really think that the U.S. government needs to spend more money to build up those reserves in the short term? Part
of the problem is, like everything, it's how we spend it. The proposal from the administration of $1.5 trillion defense budget is an over 40% increase in 1 year. When you look below that top line, we're not spending it smartly. And what I mean by that is, so we expended these very expensive, very sophisticated interceptor munitions, and the plan is to basically replace them with the same. And these are millions of dollars per missile to shoot down a few $1,000 drones. So what's called the cost exchange ratio there is hugely disadvantageous to us. What we should be doing is much cheaper, much higher volume munitions, which is just the way that the nature of warfare is changing. But the administration continues to sort of go back to 20, 30-year-old approaches. So it's easy to get stuck on that top line number, which is too high, I believe. But more concerningly is kind of going back to the old ways while our adversaries have moved into, a totally different way of warfare.
I want to pivot to a different issue. You have a unique perspective from all your colleagues on the issue of a major Supreme Court ruling that comes before an election. In 2022, your special election when you won your seat in New York was, weeks after the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. And if memory serves, you had to pivot your campaign to address the issue of reproductive rights much more assertively, and you did so. Obviously you won, so there was some success to that. Now you have a Supreme Court ruling in the Calais case in Louisiana, which obviously has not just disrupted the elections, but it seems to have that same visceral, galvanizing effect on people that the Dobbs decision did. If you're talking to your fellow Democrats or the candidates out there, what do you tell them to do about this? Because it seems like your caucus at this point has only one tool left to try to galvanize people to vote on the issue.
Well, and by the way, the Supreme Court is still fighting the issue of abortion rights. There's a major case pending on mifepristone access as we speak. On the Calais case and blowing up the what was left of the Voting Rights Act, being home the last few weeks since that decision, it has been stunning to see the response. It does remind me of the kind of ground energy we were feeling. Really? So after the Dobbs decision, there was this groundswell of energy in the district. And as I was ramping up the campaign, people in DC were telling me, don't focus on abortion rights in a purple district. And we thankfully ignored them and listened to where people were on the ground. And that really became the central thesis of our campaign. And we did win that special election. I think this is obviously a different issue, but the core idea that when you take fundamental American rights from the American people, they get really pissed, rightly so. And that really transcends the partisan divide, and particularly in I was at our biggest black church in my district the day after the verdict came down, and the pastor of that church in Poughkeepsie actually said we are going to come out and vote with a force and a fury that I think the president didn't factor in here, and so that's part of this mobilization effort, but the harms done by the administration across the board, the ICE overreach, the war, skyrocketing costs, we are going to see a bigger wave, I believe, than in 2018.
Oh, wow.
I feel that building on the ground, a rejection of Trump. At the same time, we have work to do as Democrats to not just be against Trump, but be for a set of things, and I think that's super important.
You knew on the ground in 2022 that, no, we have to talk about reproductive rights because that's all I'm hearing about. You're sensing something similar where you may get coached by national campaigns to choose column A or column B, but you think this is a thing.
Yeah, I think it's part of it. I mean, the number one thing people are dealing with is costs and wanting to see costs come down. That, unfortunately, is only getting worse. But people are capable of holding multiple things. They know Trump's failed on lowering costs, but then these are like fundamental existential American rights being ripped away from millions of people. And so it is, in my 2022 race, we talked about rights and relief. And it's a similar dynamic. People want us to fight on both of those fronts. Neither alone is sufficient.
I'm glad you brought up the court, because one of the things I think in the broader issue, and you just spoke to it, of sort of democracy and pressure testing democracy and what will people take, is that a lot of the court's decisions, from Dobbs to this recent redistricting, rolling back environmental protections, on and on, even if they're grounded in a legal theory, they do actually go against where the majority of Americans are. If you look at polling, for instance, on gerrymandering, vast majority of Americans do not support partisan gerrymandering. Similarly, on abortion, most Americans support some access. And I wonder if you see that as one of those pressure testing is how long can a country, especially a very divided country, continue to exist under laws that the majority of the citizens might not actually support?
Well, and I think you're hitting on a really important thing that just gets missed in the day-to-day or even year-to-year of covering all the things happening.
Sort of existential.
Yeah, like there's a fundamental breakdown between the governed and the governing and the governors, and just like in both sides, it's not working. The sort of foundational contract is not being met by most people. I think would say that I'm paying my taxes and I'm not getting what I want largely, or not enough of it. And so I think we need to really zoom out and take bigger swings. For example, we haven't had constitutional amendments proposed in my lifetime. And there are big structural issues like campaign finance, like voting rights, like abortion rights, frankly, that I think there's an opportunity for Democrats to, or Republicans if they want, but certainly for Democrats to put out big ideas that are aligned with where the people are and say, you know what, we've kind of lost the original intent here and the idea that this is a living, breathing thing, and let's put some big ideas out there. I think we should have term limits. I think we should have ban on stock trading by members of Congress. Those could be things enshrined not just in law, but in the Constitution. That would be energizing to tons of Americans. I mean, 98 or 99% of Americans agree on those kinds of ideas, and yet you see neither party doing them, which is crazy.
But also at the same time, you'd have to see profound bipartisan cooperation to do something like amend the Constitution. And that seems, not to be too cynical, but it seems almost unfathomable right now in this country to find that level of consensus.
Well, but it's because we focus on the issue where there isn't consensus. Both parties' leaders deliberately often focus on the divisive issues for short-term gain of electoral wins, and that is what it is. But real leadership is we're gonna focus the country where there's agreement. These 80-20, 90-10 issues where if either party was serious about that and the voters felt that from them, they would flock to them because that is what people want. So you're right, but like we shouldn't accept that as the current dynamic. And when I talk to especially like swing voters, I've got about 20,000 constituents who voted for President Trump and me in the last race. That's exactly where their head is at. They don't trust either party. They know we're kind of focusing on small ball when we have these big issues, and they're desperate for someone to lean in and really not solve it tomorrow, but show some leadership and say, yeah, it would take 10 or 20 years to do a constitutional amendment, but let's try. We've done it before.
We have just a few moments left. We have what we call a speed round of short answer questions that we promise are not painful. One of the questions we've been asking everybody who sits down in the chair is, what's the hardest part of doing this? I think people have an underappreciation of the rigors and the exhaustive level of being a federal legislator. What's the toughest part of the job?
On a personal level, I think I have young kids and just 4 and 6-year-old boys, and so just the...
Oh, they're boys too.
Yeah.
So there's a physicality to it.
They're both energizing and exhausting at the same time, as all parents and grandparents know. But just being away from them and the strain of that is certainly the personally hardest thing. I also just seeing our country going to war again, when one of the main reasons I ran for office is to prevent us from getting into stupid wars again, frankly, has been personally very hard and frustrating, infuriating actually, for me this last few months. And so it's pushed me to be very outspoken on it, but that has weighed heavily on me too.
We appreciate the authentic answer.
That is not fast enough though. This is
no.
Right?
You're like a senator over here.
sorry.
That's fast by congressional standards.
No,
I want you to own that you did that right. To steer it back to a more fun topic, because we've asked people, who's one of the smart folks you work with among the other members? And we find it interesting that the answers, not the smartest, it's not Family Feud, we're not going to buzz you, but who struck you as you having unique wisdom? Maybe somebody who you look to for ideas or mentorship? Didn't say they were easy questions. They were fun questions.
What? There's no single person. Like, it depends on the issue, which is what's cool. Like, and knowing who to go to. I mean, I think like a Jamie Raskin, for example, is just so brilliant and thoughtful, grounded in history, and has a clearer vision. So he's somebody I certainly look to and have learned a ton from. Adam Smith knows defense stuff in a way that we all can only aspire to. So we have like really smart and good people here.
This question is not on the 1 minute, but I'm going to take a little bit of host privilege here because I believe you are one of the lawmakers who's been interviewed by TMZ. And
unfortunately.
I would like
by
to know,
choice or otherwise.
No, it was not by choice.
I mean, I imagine that is not a media outlet you ever expected, but they're here in DC now. What was that experience like, and what do you make of them being here?
I got totally ambushed.
Yeah.
It was the one day I brought my boys to come vote with me, and it was like 6:30. They had
protection though.
They hadn't eaten dinner. I had like pizza, literally pizzas in my hand. I was late for votes, but they were much nicer to me, I think, because my kids were with me. Yeah. So I appreciate, and my son was very sweet, my older son. I actually think it's good. I mean, I think a more holistic view of outside of the process and in the weeds is healthy. It was like, what's the human sort of lens, which I appreciate you guys are doing this as well in this new venture. So my constituents often are asking me like much more just what's life like than how did you vote on HR or whatever.
Yeah. Do you want to do another one? You want me to take?
I'm going to steal one last one because we have him here. What committee, other than House, would you think is uniquely interesting or uniquely worthy of people's attention? People think of you as a military veteran, as a leader on armed services matters. What are we missing that also strikes your interest?
Well, I'm biased, but my other one is transportation infrastructure. Super wonky, also very bipartisan and functional. And huge things happen. Like, we're negotiating this surface reauthorization bill that will affect every road, every bridge, rail across this country, and it gets very little attention, but it's a huge deal, and it only happens every few years. The last time we passed that bill was the bipartisan infrastructure law.
It's functioning in a bipartisan way still, too?
We'll see. We're going to see the bill drop in the next few days, and there's worry that it's in an unprecedented way going to be a more partisan bill, so I hope we're wrong about that. But that committee is also a lot of fun and matters hugely to my district, so check out TNI. The hearings are very exciting.
I'm curious to ask you this just because it seems like you're thinking about these kind of big ideas, but if you had the ability to fix one element of what it's like to be a member of Congress or the legislative process or how government works, obviously there's no one magic thing, but what would be the top of your list?
Term limits. I think we should have term limits because I just think inherently change in a system like this is super important. It drives accountability, it improves trust, it just brings fresh ideas. There are some downsides and risks to it, but in my few years here, I think that would be a revolutionary change. I also think it gets closer to what the founders and framers intended of you don't do this as a career, you do it. It shouldn't be like, it should be a noble but maybe not so fun and certainly not profitable endeavor to do this. So
I posit to you though, do you think age limits would solve the problem more than term limits?
There are lazy young members that don't do their job well, and there are great, more energetic than me older members. So I think age is not the right parameter. I'm sure that polls well, and we all know why. But I just think like term limits forces everybody to earn it, and I think that's the more fair way to do it.
Scott, unless you have anything, I think it's good.
I think you did. You gave us a lot of your time. You were generous with it. I think a lot of people got a lot of new insights. Thank you, Congressman Bryan.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time. We're going to take a break, but we'll be back.
Thank you, sir.
This is cool.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in. Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
America's Vet Dogs is a national nonprofit empowering veterans, first responders, and active duty service members facing both visible and hidden disabilities through the placement of a highly trained service dog. However, recipients never bear the financial burden. You can be a part of making a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and first responders in need. Learn more by visiting vetdogs.org.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back. This is 535. I'm Susan Davis, and I am joined by my friends and colleagues, Scott McFarland and Paul Kane. How are you both doing?
I'm doing great, and I feel compelled to note that this is a Philadelphia Eagle panel.
Is it really?
Yes.
Are you from Philly, Scott?
I'm a Philly fan because I married into Philadelphia Eagles fandom. Let me tell you, when you marry into it, you're into it full throttle.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to, I should tease a future interview we're doing today, but I'm talking to Congressman Greg Casar, and he's got an issue. He's got a bill about that would make it tougher for hometown teams to move out of their cities. And I had this thought of like, if one of the Philly teams tried to leave the city, it might provoke a constitutional crisis.
Texas move that was.
There was there actually, I know we're going far afield, but there was a point a year or two ago where the Sixers, the basketball team, were threatened to move across the river to Camden, and it became a big deal. I don't think Congress ever waded into it, but Jason Smith and the Ways and Means Committee, they're taking up sports tax issues.
Yeah.
Sports are becoming a real issue for Washington and Congress, especially at the college level.
I want to just touch back on the interview we just had with Pat Ryan, because he was talking a lot at the top about the war with Iran, congressional response to it. You've been talking to members, both chambers are back for the past couple weeks. Do you get a sense of moods, things changing up here? I mean, obviously there's not a lot of excitement in Congress for this.
Yeah, right now, one of our guests tomorrow, Gabe Fleischer from Wake Up to Politics, was breaking down polling data showing just how bad Trump is right now. And he is polling, essentially, if you look at Nate Silver's averages, he is at Joe Biden post-debate levels. He's at like Trump 1.0 post-January 6th levels. And so the Republicans up here are happy because they got some wins at the Supreme Court, and they're redrawing districts throughout the South. They're gaining some seats there. The Virginia Supreme Court knocked out the Democratic favorable map plan. And so they feel like they got a little bit of wind at their backs on the infrastructure of politics across here. What do the maps look like? How much money do they have? They've got hundreds of millions of dollars of super PAC money that they could spend if they choose to spend it this fall. So on that front, Republicans feel, okay, we've got some ground to fight on. But the environment up here for Republicans is terrible. There's just nothing really good. Every once in a while, there's a slight thing that comes out that's like, okay, inflation wasn't as bad as it was, as we thought it might be. The jobs market is a bit better than we think it is. But man, when you go into the mood, the University of Michigan has this confidence survey, economic confidence of how do people feel about the economy. It is at like absolutely lowest levels ever. I think it's lower than the beginning of the pandemic 6 years ago. I have to, I pull out my phone and Google it, but like that is just a terrible feeling, along with Trump and his approval ratings being so low. And so like at this point, if they announced a real, not just a ceasefire, just the end of the war, I think the American public would be like, yeah, good, it's about time. What are you going to do about gas prices?
Yeah.
And gas prices aren't coming down anytime soon, no matter what happens with the strait.
I think that sometimes we talk about the price of gas, it seems sort of trite, like conventional political wisdom, but one of the things I think is unique about this moment with gas prices is I don't recall them ever going up this high, this fast. Gas prices have climbed over weeks and months before, we've had this politically before, but I'm talking within a period of 3 to 4 weeks. My gas prices at my local station have almost doubled. I've never seen that before.
The speed with which it's risen and the level to which it's risen have made that little band-aid they like to pull out every now and again, suspending the federal gas tax, seem almost meaningless. I mean, if you want to knock 18 cents off a gallon, people are not going to complain about that. But the cost that incurs to the Highway Trust Fund and all the work that's supposed to be done on American roads and highways may not seem worth it because it's not going to bring things back close to where they were at the start. So that little chestnut seems less attractive than it otherwise would be. And I don't know what else you can do to message on this. You can't convince constituents, can't convince voters that things are better than they are when it comes to the price of gas, the price of diesel, and the price of food. You just have to absorb it politically, and I think that's what Paul just described. Those University of Michigan numbers are striking at their pandemic level. The fact that they have only court victories to cite as accomplishments in the last few weeks to overcome gas prices tells you how jammed up anybody in power is right now. And I've been hearing from local reporters in Iowa, the local political reporters, that we're not paying them enough attention.
Yeah.
That the action in Iowa is worthy of our bandwidth. Governor's races, state legislative races, at least 2 competitive U.S. House races, and oh, by the way, a U.S. Senate race. So much of that so deeply impacts Iowa, where diesel and gas prices are as impactful as anywhere else.
I wrote about Iowa last year when I was still at the Washington Post, and I was Googling something about John Deere, that there were layoffs in one of the John Deere plants in Iowa. And the headline was, again, layoffs again. Mm-hmm. And it's because, energy costs go up, inflation goes up, tariffs make equipment more expensive. All of that causes ripple effects, and all of a sudden, farm equipment becomes too expensive. Farmers aren't buying new equipment. They're stretching it out with the tractors that they have. And then all of a sudden, there's layoffs at John Deere across Iowa, Illinois, and some places where they need to be. Look, the gas issue is something. My colleagues at Notice wrote this wonderful story about how this is an upside-down moment. Because for as long as you and I, as long as we've all been here, it's always the Republicans get to play offense on this. In 2008, they took over the House floor and were chanting "drill, baby, drill," and the because gas prices were getting too high under the House Democrats of Nancy Pelosi, and they were just saying "drill, drill, drill." And 4 years ago, at this point, after the Russia invasion of Ukraine, gas prices went up and Republicans were on offense. This was a Democratic problem. Now they're the ones, for the first time, playing defense that anybody can really remember. And they're not used to having to play defense on high gas prices.
Joe Biden's gas prices?
Yeah, every poll, if you try to say who's to blame for this, people have already forgotten about Biden. We're deep into year 2 with a fully Republican-controlled Washington, so it's just skating by with, Joe Biden. It's not going to work come November.
I talked to Ted Lieu, vice chair of the Democratic caucus, about what message he's recommending his candidates and his covenants incorporate based on what Paul just said. And he says he'd like them to synthesize cost with in Ted Lieu's words, cronyism. Mm-hmm. Who's getting rich in the Trump family while you're going broke? He's recommending having candidates try to blend those things together into a message. And we just heard from Pat Ryan, who won his seat in 2022. He pivoted at the last minute and synthesized reproductive rights with the rest of his message into one little capsule. And I think that's what the Democratic caucus would like to do now.
Pat Ryan was at the forefront of utility costs being a huge thing in terms of affordability. A lot of attention went to this ad that he had that was all about abortion rights after the Dobbs ruling and turning that into patriotism and freedom. But just as often, he told me when he got here and sworn in, he won that special election in large part because he ran just as much or more behind an ad talking about his work as a county official taking on his local utility company. And the ad opened with just a face of him and a hard hat. And it slowly panned back as he talked about fighting his local utility over price gouging. And pretty soon you realized he was up like 30, 40 feet up in the air right by a telephone pole talking about it. It was a really creative way to do things. And he told me that nationally we all focused on Dobbs' abortion rights and how that energized voters. But he also found a way to move that message into affordability and utility prices, which is now a really big thing, and both parties are trying to handle that.
I'd like to get both of your just quick takes on something Pat Ryan said before we take a break, that he said he thought this year was going to be a bigger wave than 2018, that he felt it in districts like his, which are these purple districts where you're going to feel it. Too optimistic right now, or do you think that's realistic?
I think it's, I mean, you're talking about they won 40 seats,
40 on the nose.
2018. First of all, they're not going to win 40 seats because they're starting off with 215. Back then, they were starting off with like 194. So if they won 20 seats this time, you would get to right about the same level that they were at after the 2018 midterms. The terrain is just so different right now.
The math's not mathin'.
Math is not mathing. Well, it'll math if they do that. 20 seats, it is a wave.
He's talking about a sentiment he senses on the ground, which reminded him of post-Dobbs and reminds him, even though he was a local official in 2018. Not the first person to say that. It's just, are there enough places you can fight? Are there enough places where that even matters? It's the open-ended question that's going to define the next 6 months.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but we will be right back. Congressman Molina, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with this? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. You know, let me think about that.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535. You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535. This is Paul Kane of Notice. I am joined by second-term Republican from the Hudson Valley, Mike Lawler. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Wait, you are the Hudson Valley?
Oh,
there?
yeah.
All right, okay.
I'm the lower Hudson Valley, though.
Lower
so I have
Hudson, yeah.
northern Westchester, Rockland County, Putnam County,
Okay.
3 towns in Dutchess County.
Yeah, all right.
Home of the Clintons.
Yeah, Pat Ryan was just here. And
Yeah,
like,
he's the immediate district north of me.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Would he consider you Hudson Valley, or would he
Oh,
think...
yeah. No.
Okay.
We're all, myself, Pat, and Josh Riley, portions of Josh Riley's district are the Hudson Valley. Latimer is lower Westchester and the Bronx, but Latimer is also part of the Hudson Valley.
Okay. We first want to talk about your bill, the Early Access to Screening Act.
Yeah.
The Breast Cancer Research Foundation estimates that 324,580 people will be diagnosed with breast cancer in the U.S. this year, with early detection as the most crucial tool. But this is one of those things that insurance companies, Medicare, others, do not like to pay for younger people. Explain your bill and like the direct policy impact that it could have.
Well, I think we have seen an increase in younger people getting cancer, whether it is breast cancer, whether it is colon cancer, and those two cancers in particular obviously rely heavily on screening. And from my vantage point, I think as we evaluate, what are some of the causes, it's also important to actually reduce the age for screenings. And so the objective that I've put forward is to say, look, this is a real issue. We've seen younger women getting breast cancer. The 40 and above, 45 and above, in my opinion, is just too late. And so having the age reduced and requiring the insurance companies to cover these screenings is something that I think is important. It's something that I think we should be pushing on. I think when you look at healthcare overall, preventive measures and preventive action costs far less than actually having to treat these diseases, and especially when you're talking about people who are in their 30s or 40s, long-term treatment is extensive. So the more that can be done preventive, I think, is better.
Especially if you're coming from a family with
a history of it. And obviously breast cancer is one of those documented cancers where, family genetic history does seem to play a significant role.
Okay. What is the pushback, though? There's always some sort of worries about cost. How expensive a program is this? Whether it's on the insurers,
right,
and they're going to say, well, we're going to, force this onto our customers, versus, people are already saying, well, the Medicare Trust Fund and Medicaid funds are running dry. What is the cost? I realize that there's going to be a long-term benefit, is what you're expecting, but
yeah, I think when you look at the exact cost, it is TBD, because part of it is who's going to go through that process and take the actual screening. But the pushback that I often get is that, well, it's the cases are not as prevalent, in 20-year-olds as people may think, and it's really not necessary, because if somebody does get a lump, or that they will go seek treatment. But to me, I just find that argument unconvincing, and I think when you're looking at the overall long-term trajectory here, preventative measures, pre-cancer screenings are way more helpful. And I think as you start to look at AI, for instance, and how AI is going to play a pivotal role in addressing things like cancer. The more data, the more information that is available, I think from a medical research standpoint, will also help us be able to make determinations. So some of the testing earlier and screenings earlier, I think, will have a profound impact when you layer that in with AI to actually start evaluating the overall data landscape with respect to things like breast cancer.
Also, if you're not testing younger people,
it's harder to make that determination.
Yeah, obviously, there are going to be fewer cases if you're not testing them at all. How are you doing in terms of working through any sort of bipartisan sponsors yet on this? They're on the other side of the aisle. You know, this has been an issue near and dear to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The women's congressional softball game grew out of that as an event to try and raise money that people like her and Shelley Moore Capito have been doing for a long time. Are Democrats willing to come on board for this, and where would you try to get this bill? I don't get too in the weeds in the process here, but you need a vehicle sometimes for narrow legislation.
That's the challenge. There's so many issues to legislate and so many bills that get introduced, and obviously only so much time to actually move bills on the floor, and so oftentimes you do need a much bigger vehicle to get key pieces of legislation like this through. Debbie and I have had pretty extensive conversations around this issue. I know this is an issue that's been near and dear to her heart. She has pushed to lower the age, for years. This is an issue, though, that I think in navigating, the question is, what is the right age to get not only the insurance companies but the cancer societies and get bipartisan consensus. And so, I feel very strongly about this, and despite some of the pushback that I've gotten, because I think a lot of people think that we've brought the age, down too far. But my view is, you gotta advocate, and if we can find the compromise forward, great. But I think this is an issue certainly that I've talked to Debbie extensively about, and part of it's just finding what's the right path forward on it.
Some Democrats might cynically, on background, just say, well, Republicans, they let the ACA Affordable Care Act's tax premium support expire, and now they're just trying to get good on health care issues. You've been one of the Republicans that was pushing for that to get extended. Is there any hope? Is there anything new on that front?
Yeah.
Or is that maybe a lame duck issue?
Look, healthcare is obviously one of the most complex issues that we deal with as a country. We saw the complexity of the Affordable Care Act when it was being negotiated, and there were some good things in there. I also think there were some real problems with it. And the question to me is less about the politics and more about how do we actually fix the healthcare system from an affordability standpoint, from an access standpoint, from a quality of care standpoint, and from a workforce standpoint. And so I've been fighting on these issues since coming to Congress. Like this isn't something I just stumbled upon. I worked on this issue last Congress. I've worked on access to IVF. That's a big issue that I care about extensively. The ACA Enhanced Premium Tax Credit, after the government shutdown finally ended, a bunch of us sat down, as I said I would, in a bipartisan way, about 30 of us, and really tried to negotiate a fair compromise, which was to extend the enhanced premium tax credit. And remember, that was put in place during COVID as a vehicle to help folks during that pandemic. The premium tax credit is still in effect. So what we're talking about really is whether or not the federal government is paying 88% of the premium or 78% of the premium. Even still, the problem in large measure is that premiums continue to go up astronomically. And so the question is, how do you tackle the cost of health care? And I think there are a number of things that need to be done, including insurance company reforms. Why is it that an insurance company, for instance, United Healthcare, owns one of the largest providers, Optum Health? or Aetna owning CVS Caremark. Like, why are they owning PBMs? The monopoly that has been built over these 15 years under the Affordable Care Act did not create the economies of scale that were promised. And so cost has risen. The premiums have gone up between 125 to 150% over 15 years, while insurance company profits have gone up over 2,000%. One of the things that Republicans pushed was the associated health plans and allowing small businesses to pool resources together. Every Democrat voted against that at the end of the year last year when we put that on the floor. That would have reduced health insurance premiums by 11% across the country because businesses would have been able to pool resources together and buy cheaper plans for their employees. So there are a lot of different things that I think we need to be looking at within healthcare. The ACA Enhanced Premium Tax Credit was one of those things that I was willing to support. I discharged the bill out of the House. We voted for it. Unfortunately, it died in the Senate. I wish we could get bipartisan cooperation, but each side is going to have to recognize we got to actually work towards solution, not the political dynamic of healthcare, but an actual solution on cost, access, workforce, prescription drugs. The president is right to go after most favored nation. How do we do things that actually address the long-term healthcare costs?
I think you're able to talk about something you're working on with Josh Gottheimer on AI and some fears about what could happen in elections with people relying on AI searches for somebody like yourself in a competitive district.
Well, I think,
a quick summary of that.
Yeah, and Josh and I have worked closely together on a myriad of issues, and this is just the latest one. We're both on financial services. He's on the Intelligence Committee. I'm on Foreign Affairs. We both are very much in favor of America being a leader in the world on AI, on digital assets, on quantum computing. We want that to proceed, but there needs to be a regulatory structure out of Washington, and that is something we're championing. But one of the concerns that we both share is how AI could be utilized in a way to undermine election integrity. How are the AI companies guarding against how AI can be used to manipulate information flow in our elections, information about candidates? Where are they getting the information from? Do you have foreign bad actors trying to influence the models? These are things that I think are legitimate questions that the AI companies need to come to the table and talk to Congress about how they're safeguarding against.
I mean, you're not involved in the Northern Kentucky race, but AI is, people, all sides in that Thomas Massey primary are just using AI in their advertising.
Oh, it's crazy what is happening and how AI is being utilized, not just on social media by folks across the political spectrum, but by the campaigns themselves and by the super PAC groups. And so, this is something that I think we have to safeguard against and recognize, like, there are limitations to how AI should be used in the course of our electoral campaigns.
All right, this is we call it the 535 1 minute. Real quick, what is the best part of being in Congress?
Actually being able to get things done. Anytime you can pass legislation in support of your constituents, it's a big achievement. I was proud of what I was able to do in lifting the cap on salt to really provide tax relief for my constituents.
What's the most difficult part?
7-day-a-week job and a lot of time spent away from your family.
If you could fix one thing, what would that one thing be?
Ending gerrymandering. That's the biggest driver of why it's hard to get bipartisan compromise. There's only 19 seats that are actually competitive. Mine's one of them out of 435.
Best food in your district?
That's a good question. You know what? I'm Italian, Irish, from New York. I love Torriello's pizza.
All right. Best committee assignment?
I love being the chair of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs.
All right. The smartest member of Congress?
French Hill.
All right. Your favorite person on the other side of the aisle, and you're not allowed to say Josh Gottheimer.
If it's not Josh Gottheimer, I'll go with another short Jewish guy, Jared Moskowitz.
All right. What is your favorite phrase uttered just here in the Capitol complex that you hear nowhere else?
Oh, God. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a moron.
Your buddy Gottheimer had a very colorful one when we asked him that involved language that cannot be said. Well, cannot be said on official networks. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. We're going to take a break right now. 5:35. We'll be right back.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
You're watching.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535. You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back. This is 535, and I'm Susan Davis, and I'm joined by Congressman Greg Casar, who is also the chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Susan.
If I had to think of a word that I've heard the most in politics this year, it's probably affordability. And the Progressive Caucus has recently outlined a fairly ambitious piece of legislation. I'm just going to name a couple of things. It would lower drug prices, cap childcare costs, crack down on utility companies, ban surveillance pricing, increase paid time off. It's a lot in there. What's the through line in this agenda, and how did you put the pieces together?
Well, look, people are hearing the word affordability all the time now because Americans are hurting. Life is just too damn expensive, and corporations are ripping people off, while too often politicians here in Washington, D.C. collect checks from those corporations rather than help out with the problem. And so we don't think that affordability is a hoax, like Donald Trump has said, but it also can't just be a buzzword without anything behind it. And so we've released this package of 10 fresh, new ideas that would make your life less expensive while cracking down on the ultra wealthy and the corporations that are making things expensive. And so the Progressive Caucus put together this slate of things that will save every American family money. Save you money on your utilities and childcare and housing. Make sure you don't get ripped off by AI companies. And then ban big money in politics so that we can make it all stick. That's the kind of agenda that we know actually doesn't just play well in progressive districts. It's the kind of agenda that we know is popular nationwide, where people are just paying too much.
I mean, this is, I would think, fair to characterize it as pretty populist, a populist agenda. A lot has been said about the Democratic Party bleeding working class voters to the Republican Party. Is it fair to characterize this as a direct appeal to those voters that have been turning away from your party in recent elections?
Yes. I mean, the reason I'm a Democrat is because of the FDR era and the LBJ era, where we created Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, defeated fascism around the world, built the union movement for working class people and with working class people, and then took on the powerful that were screwing people over. And I think we've got to get back to that And that's what we're doing with this new affordability agenda. Like, if I was just to rant for just 1 minute, think about our overtime laws. It's been basically since back under FDR that we created overtime. That law has not been updated in 90 years. We should have overtime pay not time and a half, but double time. That way people make more money that work so hard and maybe get a little bit more time off. We should catch up to other advanced countries and say you get guaranteed at least 2 weeks paid vacation. That's not just a progressive issue, actually. Whether you're Democratic, Independent, or Republican, we find that people overwhelmingly think workers should get paid more, should be able to take time off, and then shouldn't have their prices jacked up by folks like Big Pharma or Big Oil.
You know, not too long ago, an agenda like this would have been criticized by the Republican Party as government overreach, too much government intervention. But I was thinking about this morning, that we actually live in a time where the Republican Party is pretty into government overreach. This is a very powerful president who wants to see a big, expansive government, different ideas of what it should do with it. But I wonder if you think that the country is actually comfortable with a more aggressive federal government. They just might have a disagreement on how they want the government to use that power.
Overwhelmingly, we hear from voters that they feel like the government is too bought off by corporations. And what I've heard from people that used to be Democrats, but now have just quit voting or maybe voted for Trump this last election, is they feel like the Democratic Party has either been weak or has been scared to stand up to those special interests that are screwing them over. And so what I've said is that the Democratic Party, if we want to be a winning and effective party again, it's not just about the old tired debate about going left or going center. It's about going directly to what working class voters are asking for. Let me give you an example. Right now, no matter where you come from on the political spectrum, gas prices are out the roof because those gas companies are jacking up prices in response to this war, and they're making a killing off of it. Billions of dollars in excess profits that they didn't work for, but that they're getting. So a populist response that is overwhelmingly popular is let's tax those windfall profits and send every American family a rebate check worth $400 or $500. That is a powerful idea that progressive caucus members are championing, like Ro Khanna. But it's not just because it appeals to progressives. It's because the Progressive Caucus has shown that we are willing to lead the way and stand up to those oil executives that are making billions of dollars off of this war.
It's notable to me that obviously most of the co-sponsors on this are part of the Progressive Caucus, which is some of the more liberal members in the Democratic Party, but not all. That there are a couple members from swing districts that have signed on to this bill. I think, Seth Magaziner, another congressman.
Josh Riley has been great on this.
What does that tell you? Does it tell you that there was this kind of sense that you had to be more moderate, more conservative to win in these swing districts, and this kind of suggests that these lawmakers are saying, not anymore.
What I think I hear overwhelmingly from lawmakers is that voters don't think in like a political science class about where do you fall on this or that Washington, D.C. policy. They want to know if you're going to help them out or if you're just going to help yourself out here when you're in Washington, D.C. And that's why someone like Josh Riley, who's in one of the most competitive districts in America, not only co-sponsored the electric utility lowering electric costs bill, he actually co-authored it with us. And that's because these for-profit utilities are making so much money jacking up your electric rates. And they're taking that money and they're laughing about how on earnings calls they're paying for their private jets and their resorts while you have to pay their increasing electric bills. And this bill says, screw that, we're not going to do that anymore. And so that's why on the Lowering Utility Bills Act, we've got a very swing district member. I work with Senator Ruben Gallego on banning surveillance pricing, right? He is in a very swing Senate seat. And so this is about making sure that working class voters know we're for them first. That's, I think, the core identity of who the Democratic Party is supposed to be.
Let's talk a couple of the specific policies, and you brought up two that I'd like to talk about. One being, you brought up first the utility provision. Can you explain more specifically how this legislation would rein in utility companies?
Yeah, so most places in the country, not in Austin, Texas, because we have a public utility, but in most parts of the country, you have a for-profit utility for gas and electric. And they're a monopoly. They are the only provider in your area, and that occurs under federal law because, look, there's one set of wires, and so there's one company that's allowed to operate. But that company makes an agreement. Since they're a monopoly, they can only charge supposedly reasonable rates. But over the last few years, we've seen people's electric bills go up 40, 50, 60%. And when you go and see why these electric utilities are saying they have to raise their earnings, it's because they are padding massive corporate profits that you couldn't get anywhere else in the business world like this. And they're charging for things like lobbying or campaign contributions. It's insane. But they have such a lobbying force that we've not been able to rein them in before. And so now we're saying, if Democrats retake the majority, we are going to finally take on these for-profit electric companies and say, you can't jack up people's electric bills anymore because you want a private jet, or because you want a golf club membership, or if you want to pad your pockets with profits that you could not make in another industry, especially if you have a monopoly like this.
Do you want a more tightly regulated, for-profit, private utility system, or do you think that there should be more nonprofit or government-run utility companies?
Look, public utilities like we have in Austin or Seattle or San Antonio, you actually see lower electric bills. And so people that want to pursue that, I think that's great. But right now, we have the majority of the country under these for-profit electric utilities, and at a minimum, we should say you should not be able to rake in such high returns that we hear the investors on their earnings calls laughing about how they are screwing over the American ratepayer. That has got to stop.
Also, surveillance pricing, I think, is an issue that everyday Americans
it makes people so mad. Once you find out about this,
this is
like,
very Main Street now. So surveillance pricing, as I understand it, is companies can use AI to sort of, they can see if I'm searching flights to Maine this summer, and then they can adjust the price based off of my searches when I'm going or any other data they've been able to compile about.
Even worse, what JetBlue said on Twitter the other day is that somebody had to get to a funeral. So they had to get an emergency flight, and suddenly their prices were like $250 more than they were before. And then JetBlue responded to that person's tweet by saying, clear all your privacy data and cache, and then maybe the price will come down. I mean, that's crazy.
Is surveillance pricing the same thing as dynamic pricing, or are they
These things are different.
Okay.
So dynamic pricing is when a lot of people want a good, them increasing the cost.
Like concert tickets.
Like concert tickets. Yeah. Surveillance pricing, and there's all sorts of problems with some kinds of dynamic prices, but surveillance pricing is this new kind of way that people can price gouge you, corporations can price gouge you, that we've got to stop before it spreads like wildfire across the economy. We recently saw the Washington Post get caught doing this. Instacart was recently caught red-handed trying to do this. And what they do is they take in troves of your data, run it through an AI model to find out how much they can charge you, how much more they can charge you because of your individual circumstance. Or, when it comes to the gig economy, how little they can pay you. So I'll give you an example. Traditional price gouging is like, let's say a hurricane is coming. They know a disaster is coming. It's illegal price gouging to jack up gas for everybody.
Gas, things like that.
But now if they know that you have a personal disaster happening in your life and you've got to catch a flight, that they can know your personal circumstances and give you a different price than me. Or let's say you are a gig economy driver that gets paid by an app. They could find out from your personal data that you've recently visited a pawn shop or that you're trying to get a payday loan, so they know your personal circumstances are tough and that they can lower the amount that they pay you individually compared to your neighbor. And I think that's got to stop. The price should be the price. A price tag is fairness because everybody should be charged the same amount.
Does it inherently, would it just basically tell companies they can't use surveillance data to set prices?
That's right. Okay. It would become illegal, basically illegal price gouging, just like it's illegal right now to jack up everybody's gas prices when a hurricane is coming. It would be illegal to charge you more for an airline ticket because they know you've got to get to a funeral.
It's interesting to me because some of these ideas, you could actually hear Republican support. Things like surveillance pricing, I think, is a really good example. Do you see any of this as an effort to maybe get that support across the aisle, or do you see this really more as part of a broader Democratic agenda that needs to be something like an H.R. 1 in the next Congress?
Look, in my view, this unites the voters and divides the lobbyists. And so I think that this could help define who the Democratic Party is as we hopefully regain a majority. And I've found huge amounts of Republican support on the ground from voters.
Yeah.
And I hope that those voters push their Republican lawmakers to follow suit. The problem, let's take AI surveillance pricing for an example. I think Republican voters, everyone I've talked to, is enraged when they hear that JetBlue story, hear about them using AI to jack up your prices. But I hear from Republican lawmakers that they want to have less rules on AI, that Donald Trump is pushing for deregulation of AI. And that's because of the AI lobby, not because of Republican voters. So I'm trying to do bipartisan work with voters, with everyday Americans, and then hope that they can push their politicians to do the right thing.
Do you have a sense of where leadership is on this in terms of making it center to the Democratic agenda?
Yeah, look, my job as Progressive Caucus Chair is to represent half of the Democratic caucus, more or less, and to make sure progressive priorities are heard by our leadership. These ideas you and I have talked about, these are some of the very first things that I talked to leadership about when I got elected to this role. And they were very receptive. And in the coming weeks and months, we will expect to see what their policy agenda is for the entire Democratic caucus. And I hope it includes into ideas like these.
Do you find, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the soul searching in the Democratic Party after the 2024 election. I think economic issues are a good example of that. Do you feel like that's still a tug within the Democratic Party of how progressive, how populist to go on these economic issues?
Yeah, there's always been different parts of the Democratic coalition. There's always been that more pro-worker, populist, let's make sure that no matter your background, your race, where you live, that you should not get screwed over by corporations, should be able to make it. There's always been that part of our party. And then there are the sort of more corporate forces who just want Democrats to, and actually this was mentioned as a strategy once in the New York Times, quote, roll over and play dead. The idea that Democrats can win solely by pointing out how bad Trump is and then trying not to be noticed for anything else. I think that's a losing strategy. I think that, of course, we should point out when Trump commits criminal acts, when Trump hurts working class people. But I don't think that's enough. I think we have to show voters that if they put us in charge, how we'll actually make your life better. Being an anti-Trump party isn't enough. Of course, we should oppose what he's doing when he's hurting people, but folks also need to know who we really are, and we should show ourselves to be anti-big, greedy corporation and pro-everyday working class person.
I also, since I have you, I want to ask you about, I believe it's called the Home Team Act.
Oh, this is fun.
This is something that could provoke strong feelings in sports fans. So this bill, I should also know, is sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders. Outline what you wanted to do.
Yeah, here's what the Home Team Act does. It says that before a major league sports team can get ripped out of your community and move somewhere else because a billionaire owner decides that they want to move the team, that they've got to give that community at least 1 year's notice and give the community a chance to keep the team at home. That means that they could go into a Green Bay Packers model that has successfully kept that amazing franchise in the smallest market in the NFL for over a century. Or it could also be a philanthropist or a business owner in the local community that wants to buy the team and keep it there. And of course, if nobody wants to buy it at a fair price, then the team could move. But I think this kind of bill would have kept the Supersonics in Seattle. This kind of bill would have kept the Houston Oilers in my city where I was born, because I remember the Houston Oilers getting moved by an ultra-rich owner out to Tennessee. Of course, Bernie Sanders remembers when his beloved Brooklyn Dodgers got moved.
He's still angry about that.
He's still upset about it because, look, the major leagues only exist because of federal law. Basically, federal law allows them to continue to exist as the monopoly they are. And I think in exchange for that, they shouldn't have billionaire owners be able to just rip your sports team out of your city, devastating fans, all because they're trying to basically make a buck and squeeze more money out of local communities. And even if you aren't a sports fan, I think this is important for taxpayers too, because as we see right now with the Chicago Bears, you have the Indiana government willing to give them millions and millions of dollars, and then the Illinois taxpayers have to then come in and try to spend millions more to keep the Bears in Chicago. And at the end of the day, everybody loses out except for the really rich owners of the team. So if you're from Chicago, this is a keep the Bears in Chicago bill.
How much of this, though, is maybe a way to pressure teams that try to extract taxpayer dollars in cities to build their stadiums or build their infrastructure and then benefit from that? Is it a way to also say, hey, you can't just take the taxpayer money and then move on?
Yeah, look, if communities are going to come together and help bring a team to their city, and then the billionaire owner can just threaten to leave unless you hand him even more money he doesn't need, I mean, we just see it happen over and over and over again. And so we need to have a situation where we have a level playing field, where the taxpayers and the fans have an ability to keep the team at home. I think it's also an opportunity to show people the ways that billionaire influence is messing not just with your life at work, but also your life after work. They're messing up the things that we love. They have so much power and money, And I think members of Congress should start standing up against them and standing beside fans, beside workers, beside consumers, beside everyday people. And yeah, if those billionaire owners hate me, well, I welcome that. They can come in and talk badly about me, but I would rather have most voters with me, and I think that's the direction we need to take the Democratic Party.
I was joking with my colleagues earlier. I'm from Philadelphia, and as I was thinking about the idea of any of those franchises,
if they tried to move the Eagles,
the city,
it would cause
a constitutional crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
There would be much bigger problems on hand. Congressman, I've had a lot of fun talking to you, but before I let you go, we do a little thing called 1 minute.
Okay.
A little bit of a lightning round where I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your experience in Congress, and you have to answer quick.
Okay.
What is the best part of being in Congress?
Well, like when so many of my friends right now feel like there's nothing they can do to make a difference, I'm, humbled to be in a job where I feel like I can make some part of a difference.
Who in Congress do you look to and think that guy's or that woman's really smart?
Well, everybody knows it's Nancy Pelosi. That's what everybody thinks when she walks around here. Pretty amazing.
If I land in your district and I'm starving, where's the first place you tell me to go eat?
Well, here's the problem. There's a current war happening in my district between Austin and San Antonio. It's this taco war about whose tacos are best. And I'm not allowed to take a side in the war, but what I'll tell you is tacos anywhere in Austin or San Antonio is like 1,000,000 times better than here in DC.
That's what every Texan says. I know that's true, but there
you
has
gotta
to
come.
be. I'm saying the first place you stop.
There is a place that, right on my way back from the airport that I sometimes can slide in before they close called Paprika Tacos. That's new, and you should check that place out.
I also like it too sometimes where I've been in Texas where the best taco is like in the back of a gas station. Like that's always when you know you're
There's
going to get a good
There's
taco.
a really good one like in an alleyway that's attached to the back of a club in downtown Austin, Taqueria de Diez. And so for people watching, if you're in Austin, grab one of those.
Yeah, the grimier the place, the better the taco. I think that's true everywhere. Congressman Casar, thank you so much for talking to us. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
I appreciate it.
Before we go, let's talk about tomorrow's show. We've got a great show tomorrow. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have House Rules Committee Chairman Jim McGovern. He's going to talk about the lack of rules in rules and also an issue that is very close to his heart, which is making sure kids don't go hungry. We're also going to talk to Rhode Island Congressman Seth Magaziner. He's got a bill that would guarantee 2 weeks of paid leave, which I'm sure would be very popular for many people. And also Ayanna Pressley, who's going to talk about her housing bill. On behalf of all of us here, thank you for watching. If it's important to the 535, it's important to us, and we'll see you tomorrow.